Everyone to this evening's virtual meeting of Kensington and Chelsea's Planning Applications Committee. This evening's meeting is held in accordance with government regulations allowing councils to hold virtual meetings. I'm Councillor James Husband, Chairman of the committee, and I'm joined this evening by 4 of my fellow councillors. Perhaps we can each quickly introduce ourselves. Maybe we can start with Councillor Bakhtiar. Mo, would you like to just say hello?
Good evening, everyone. This is Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar, a member of this committee. Thanks.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Councillor Bennett. Tom?
Yeah. Thanks, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Tom Bennett here, Councillor for Redcliffe Ward.
Great. Thank you. And Councillor Schmetterling. Dory?
Good evening, it's Dory Schmetterling, and I'm Councillor for Pembridge Ward.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Spalding. Malcolm.
Good evening, Chairman. Councillor Malcolm Spalding, Earls Court Ward.
Great, thank you. Now, it will be the 5 of us who are councillors who will be making the decisions on the applications before us this evening. We're also joined by officers, and they will present the applications and also advise us. So just quickly running through the people that we will hear from later. The presenting officers will be Alison Long. Alison, would you like to just quickly come up on screen?
Good evening, so I'm Alison Long. I'm a Principal Planning Officer in the South Area team. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sarah Gentry. Sarah?
Good evening, I'm Sarah Gentry, Principal Planning Officer, and I'm in the North team.
Okay. And Katie Hurrell. Katie?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Katie Hurrell. I'm team leader for the South Area team and will be sharing presenting duties with Alison Long this evening.
Good. And finally, the officer team this evening is led by Lisa Chung, who is the Head of Development Management. Lisa, would you like to just say hello quickly?
Thank you, Chairman, and hello to everyone this evening. As the Chairman has said, I am the Head of Development Management. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. If any other officers need to speak, then I'll introduce them to so everyone can understand who they are. As we go through the meeting, can I ask everyone please to keep your audio off and video off, I beg your pardon, and stay on mute unless you're about to speak, to make sure that the connection is good. I would just like, finally, before we get underway, to emphasise that all the councillors on the committee have received the reports, the various representations, and also the addendum report, which has been circulated. Okay. So if we can move now to the formal agenda, are there any apologies for absence? I don't think there are. Everyone who is scheduled to be on this committee is indeed present.
Yes, there are none, Chairman.
I'm sorry? Who's this?
Sorry, there are no apologies. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Anne. Exactly. Next item, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Are there any other declarations? Councillor Schmetterling.
Chair, yes, because I've had contact to the residents of the Limes in connection with this application, and also because it's in my ward, I should like to step back.
Okay, I think that's understood, and I agree with that. Actually, in similar fashion, when we reach the application relating to Lexum House, it's exactly the same. I do know it's in my ward. I know some of the people involved, and also I was involved in actually one of the previous applications. So I think that I should step aside. When we get to that item, colleagues, I would propose that Councillor Bennett chair the meeting for that item, and indeed that he acts as vice chairman in the hopefully unlikely event that we have problems with connections and things like that.
Dr. Milverham.
So that
is now
good.
Exiting.
Now, before we get underway, we have the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of March. Now, these minutes have been circulated. Colleagues, are you content that that they are approved as a record of that meeting?
Agreed.
Chair, can I just ask?
Agreed.
Yeah.
I wasn't present, so I can't comment.
Well, no, no. If you weren't present, that's fair enough. Okay, so that is agreed. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, in that case, we can move on, I think, to the items of business. Now, I think it might help members of the public who are listening in if I just very quickly indicate the order in which we are going to take the applications this evening. We're going to start in a moment or two with the application Park House on those Square, then the application in Palace Gardens Terrace, Cornwall Mews West, the Limes, then we will move to Lexum House and Lexum Gardens, then garages in Wharfdale Street, Markham Street, Princess Gate Mews, and concluding with the application at a properties in Hands Crescent. Okay, so that will be our order of business. Okay, so in that case, I think we can get underway. So we can have the first item of business, which is Park House on Low Square. And I think Alison Long, Alison, you're going to present this, is that right? Alison?
That's correct, thank you.
You're ready.
Okay, so thank you, good evening. The application site comprises a single residential dwelling currently under construction, accessed from Pelham Street to the north and Onslow Square to the southwest. Planning permission was granted in February 2019 for the demolition of the existing building and the construction of a replacement two-storey dwelling above an approved basement. The approved plans are shown here included an open courtyard to the centre of the building. This permission has been implemented with works drawing close to completion. This is a material consideration which carries significant weight in the determination of the current application. This application before you today seeks a minor material amendment under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act. This has the effect of granting a new independent permission to carry out the development as previously approved, but subject to amended conditions. The application seeks retrospective planning permission to vary Condition 2 relating to the approved plans for the addition of a glazed steel-framed retractable roof over the internal courtyard. This slide shows the retractable roof in plan form, both in an open and a closed position, with the images below showing the roof in place at the site. The images are showing the roof in its closed position. This next slide shows the retractable roof in elevation in an open position. The top drawing shows the elevation facing Onslow Square, with the elevation below showing the view seen from properties along Pelham Place. Here, the retractable roof is shown again in elevation, but this time in a closed position. I would highlight that the elevation plans show the proposal for the addition of a green wall along the boundary of the site between 21 and 23 Pelham Place. The two images below show an artist's impression of the proposed green wall in place at the site. This final slide shows section drawings of the retractable roof, again in both an open and a closed position, and shows sight lines from the rear gardens of 21 and 23 Pelham Place. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission for the proposals, subject to the completion of the legal agreement to secure matters in section 7 of the report and the recommended conditions in section 10. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to a noise report submitted by the applicant earlier today in relation to the operation of the retractable roof. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, in that case, now there are speakers about this case. So if I can first ask Mrs. Hubar, I think I hope I pronounced your name correctly. You are an objector. I think you live in Pelham Place, yes?
Yes.
And yes. So please, when you are ready, you have up to 3 minutes to address the committee. So when you're ready, please go ahead, and afterwards there may well be questions.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. There are some 50 households affected by this application, and neighbours have described the new dome as an ocean liner at sea, or to quote the RBKC enforcement officer, an enormous bicycle. It indicates how aesthetically unpleasing the new illuminated skyline is going to be at the back of our houses, and I submitted, as you saw, that nighttime photo of the courtyard lit up, and I urge you to look at that before making a decision. There are 2 points I want to make: residents' confidence in RBKC planning, and secondly, light pollution. Residents' concerns: this retractable roof, it's a misleading term. Even when fully retracted, the open space is less than 50% of the original internal courtyard. And despite immediate complaints to RBKC, the council took over 5 months to secure the retrospective planning application from Mr. Caring. And it really erodes residents' trust in the planning process when, in an instance like this, a retrospective planning application is delivered as a fait accompli, and surely works should have been halted whilst the application was outstanding. Another erosion in confidence is the probable stealth of additional outside space, which this application facilitates. And to explain what you couldn't see in those photos or those images is that next to the glass dome is a flat roof which has never been used. And what I and near neighbours anticipate is through the operational upkeep of the glass and this green wall, that this flat roof becomes demised as a terrace with a bedroom it adjoins. That is, over time, it becomes lawful over time rather in planning terms, which means in just 4 years, those with gardens backing onto the site, we lose our garden privacy. And whilst obvious to us living here, we're worried that the wool is being pulled over the council planner's eyes. The loss of visual privacy at the back of the Pelham houses is against the National Planning Policy Framework and is contrary to Planning Policy CL4, which is about the setting of heritage buildings. Pelham houses are all grade 2-star, and CL5, which is loss of privacy. The second reason was light pollution. RBKC imposes very tough rules as to lighting allowance for new undergarden works, and surely it should take a similar tough stance when the plan is to enclose ground floor space which was previously open. Birds and humans are disorientated by artificial lighting, and there's a wealth of reading material about it and the damage it does to the ecosystem. So my question is, why is there one rule for undergarden works and another for ground floor internal courtyards? This new illuminated enclosed space is some 40 square metres, over 12 times in size of what would be allowed had it been undergarden. In conclusion, please use your powers to reject this application to protect the environment. Remember, in truth, the dome is only 50% retractable, and I really don't want this green wall. It's going to take further light out of my garden. I've already lost more than 10% because of the park house scheme, And the neighbours and I are worried that the green wall means that over time the flat roof becomes demised as a terrace. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. What we will do now is, if we can hear from Mr. Jones, who is the agent, and then once we've heard from him, members of the committee will probably have questions to both of you. So, Mr. Jones, George Jones, are you with us here?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so please, when you're ready, likewise, you have up to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair, councillors and officers. I've just had my vaccine, so I hope I last the session. As members will be aware, in assessing this application, your professional officers identified 2 determining issues: whether the proposals preserve or enhance the character or appearance of the building and wider conservation area, and whether the proposals ensure good living conditions for occupiers of neighbouring properties, of which is highly important for us as neighbours. In respect of the conservation area, your professional officer recognised the glazed structure over the courtyard is set against the backdrop of a 2.5 metre high glazed link, which has the benefit of planning permission under the initial 2018 consent. Accordingly, your professional officers concluded where the glazed roof is visible from surrounding properties, in this context, set against the lawful glazed structure associated with the property, the proposal sits comfortably within its setting and preserves the character and appearance of the conservation area. The officer confirmed that this would not result in a material increase in noise and disturbance. However, specifically, some points raised by objectors in relation to light spillage, and we addressed in a lighting assessment. And I think it's important to add that the site is currently under construction, using sort of stronger than normal builders' lights. And I think the actual reality is that these lights will be downlit, and as we've said in our report, they'll be housed within the soffits of the building, which encloses the lawful courtyard area. So we don't accept that it will be lit up, because we have no intention of lighting upwards, and nor does the structure itself have lighting in it pointing upwards. To allay residents concerned about noise, which was the second issue, we commissioned an acoustic report, which you have been sent, showing that we are well within the very strict RBKC planning guidelines. Finally, I'd like to say that we have wanted to go over and above to include this green wall to try and satisfy neighbours looking from their highest windows down at the property. And obviously, we're still keen to do this if it can be done in a way that pleases the neighbours. We've obviously had a long build, slowed down by the pandemic, and we hope will be finished very, very shortly. And we would like to get this resolved. Accordingly, we respectfully request that you recommend and grant planning permission for this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So, colleagues, questions to either the objector or applicant. Who would like to go first? Any questions? Mo, Councillor Bhatia.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, my question is to the objector, Ms. Hubba. How are you directly affected by this? And if you wanted to see some conditions to be put on this application, on this planning application, what type of conditions would you like to see?
Thank you, Councillor Bhatia. The view from every floor, from the ground floor upwards, sees this glass dome. And it's especially worse, of course, the higher up we go. There's no way that the applicant can put a 50-foot high story screen to screen it out for me. The acoustic report that's come in late, you can say what you like about the glazing. It looks appalling. So you're asking how I'm affected and what conditions I would like. I'm particularly concerned about that terrace, that flat roof, becoming demised as a terrace to the adjoining bedroom. I don't want a green wall. It's going to take away even more of the life that I've got in my garden. As I said, I've already lost at least 10%, if not more. So the condition would be no green wall. I will just have to put up with the glare from the glazing. Yeah, so that's the position I'm at.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Mo. Councillor Bennett, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, another question for Ms. Hubar. Can you briefly explain to me what the difference, in your view, is between what there is currently permission for and what has been built and is being applied for?
If you look at the photo which I submitted in my objection, which shows you a nighttime image, and I know that Mr. Jones has argued that the lighting won't be that strong once it's actually officially in place, but it gives you a view of two sets of glass structures, one of which I feel is totally unnecessary. Why the first one was ever put forward to RBKC, I don't know. But my impression is that I'm looking over some sort of a market garden with a hot housing for plants or tomatoes or something. It's not the view that I would expect to see from in a conservation area. My neighbour and myself were both, well, 3 of the 4 houses are Grade 2 star, and our setting is completely destroyed by this application.
So just to be clear, because I'm trying to understand exactly what there was permission for previously, or there is already permission for. So where that retractable roof is under current permission, is that just courtyard, or is there
Yes, that's an open internal courtyard of about, I don't know, 9 or 10 metres by 4 or 5 metres, and now it's shrunk a little bit with this, what the enforcement officer called a bicycle shed, rounded sections, and then the retractable bit, which but even when you retract it fully, actually the the open space is less than 50% of what was there before.
Okay, so that's helpful. And Chairman, if I may, also just Mr. Jones, whether there's anything he would add to that in terms of the difference between what we're judging on tonight and what there's already permission for.
Thank you, Councillor. I would just like to add that that picture you had in front of you, the glass walkway, which is behind the terrace area, has planning permission.
Yeah.
What we're seeking for planning for now is the roof, the retractable roof over the courtyard.
Mm-hmm. So that would have been under the current permission. That's just open space, as Ms. Hubar said.
It is open space connected to the living areas because all the house is built around it.
Yeah, no, understood. Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Schmetling.
Thank you. I'll also take my hand down, otherwise it stays up. Hang on, just get rid of it. I suppose I have one to the objector and one to the applicant, and it regards the main objections. So to Ms. Hubar, the applicant mentioned his noise report and that the objection was noise, but when I look through the objections, it strikes me that the main objection is light. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm not sure if you see the nighttime photo, it's absolutely light at night, and also aesthetically, looking out from any of the floors, higher floors, you see this mass of glasswork. It's aesthetically so displeasing.
Yes, so the noise doesn't appear to be really a problem. Is that correct?
Well, to be honest, the noise report's only just been made available. I have no idea what the noise is when it opens and closes. That would be an additional concern possibly. But my main concern indeed is that it's there at all and the light impact that has.
All right. Well, I can say that whatever the noise report says, the proposed condition, I don't know if you've seen it, but the proposed condition, which is a standard condition. In fact, there's two standard conditions. One, which basically sets the noise levels relative to ambient. And there's no need to worry about it because ambient varies throughout the day, of course, and at night is very low. So it has to meet that standard of whatever it says. You know, it's great that it meets the standard, but at the end of the day, if you can hear it, it's too loud. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to put the question to the applicant. Mr. Jones, you mentioned that the noise is a problem, but apparently, and if you look through the written objections, noise isn't such a big problem. For the it's not really mentioned, but in any case, regardless of what you write in the report. So the question is, you do realise that you've got to meet the standard proposed condition, which is a certain level below ambient. That's the first thing. You recognise that.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we had a Zoom call with the residents, including Miss Hubar, a few weeks ago, and noise was brought up. So I therefore did a survey in order to hopefully give sort of data-specific proof that it wasn't just me saying it's fine. And I'm totally respectful of the EHO and the conditions in this planning report, where, like you say, if it's too loud, then there's recourse to action against that. But I'm extremely confident, as per the report, that you would not hear it open from any of the neighbouring properties. Okay, well,
I suppose that's reassuring from that point of view, because, and it can be, yeah, that's right. And there's an automatic, well, there's a switch off in there. If it's heard, and you're told it's heard, you have to switch it off, and the anti-vibration mounts. Now, and the question of the lights, which is clearly what bothers everybody, the light and I suppose the glasswork. What do you think you could do to mitigate it? And what about the green wall mitigation that Ms. Hubar mentioned? What would you suggest, given, as you said, you're trying to please the residents, so what could you do about it?
Well, I would, thank you, Councillor. I'd say, just taking those two points individually, the first one, the light, what Ms. Hubar is seeing at the moment is a construction site, and actually the lighting scheme, as you'd expect in your house, anyone's house, I guess, the light focuses down, and it's not of the light type or strength that you have to have by law when you're building a property throughout the winter, especially. So this is a living room, a living area, and you don't want it to be bright, and also we don't want our neighbours to feel that there's going to be light pollution, and the officer in charge of this application also doesn't feel that there will be, and we did a lighting assessment that backed that up. The second point about the green wall was only a suggestion to try and, as you saw from the artistic impression, when Mrs. Hubar is in her highest room, obviously they look down on the property. There's nothing much we can do with that, but I can absolutely guarantee that there is no interest from our point of view to make that flat roof a terrace in any way. And I'd just like to focus on this application, which is not for a terrace on there. And we are happy to put plants up there, but also we won't if neighbours will not want it. So it's really up for discussion still. I'm happy to do anything either way.
Okay. Chair, I've got a follow-on from this.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I can't see it at the moment, but would you be willing to put a condition on there so that the terrace will not be used? Sorry, that the roof will not be used as a terrace. Oh, here we go. It's already there. Sorry, number 23.
Yes, we've agreed that already, Councillor.
Okay, so maybe that gives a bit of comfort also to the objectors, because there's quite a lot of objections. It isn't just Ms. Hubar. She just happens to be speaking, but there's a load of them. All the very similar comments. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I respond at all, or not really?
No, unfortunately, you can't, Mrs. Hibber. So thank you very much indeed. If there are no more questions from members, then we move on to the next part of the meeting, which is when we, as committee members, can ask officers questions.
Chair?
Yeah, Dory, what's your...
Sorry, I see also Councillor Bakhtiar's raised his hand, so maybe let him go first.
Well, yes.
You can go first, Chair.
Yeah, I was about to... thanks, Dory. I was about to call him. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Because I've got a question for the previous session.
Yeah.
For the previous session, that's the thing. But just to make sure, Councillor Bakhtiar,
sorry.
Or what we've just done.
Sorry, can I just stop things there? Sorry, did you have another question?
Yes.
To either the applicant,
yes,
or the agent?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't appreciate that. So, Dory, you go ahead with that, and then we move on. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, because this is all affecting people's lives, I suppose I really should ask the objector whether she has gained any comfort or any sort of reassurance from what the objector has, what the applicant has mentioned in his answer to my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Not really, because he calls this living area, but it's not. It's really supposed to be sort of an internal courtyard garden area. It shouldn't be seen as additional living area. So I'm afraid I'm not happy with his comments.
And he mentioned the green wall can be discussed.
It can be discussed. I'm concerned as to whether it's going to be on the party, almost on the party wall, because the building is less than a metre now from my back garden, or whether it's going to be right adjacent to the glazed dome. Depending on where it's going to be situated, that'll affect my opinion about it. If it's further away and next to the glass dome, that might be acceptable, but I'm really not happy with the idea of it being maintained, because it means people have to have access to it. It needs to be watered. It needs to be replanted. The privacy in my back garden and my near neighbours gets affected by this traffic that we've never had before on that roof.
I have to tell you, I've seen plastic green walls, which look quite nice. But anyway, finally, my final point is you expressed concern about the use of the roof as a terrace. This is explicitly excluded. It's condition 23.
That, be that as it may, there are French doors that lead onto that terrace. So I can only assume that one of the underlying reasons was to make that a private terrace adjoining the bedroom. There have never been in the past French doors leading onto that flat roof, but now there are. I question the honesty of that installation.
Mr. Jones, thank you very well.
Thank you, Councillor. We're happy to put the green wall, and it was proposed as far away from the boundary wall and as close to the glass as possible, which will literally sit within 10 centimetres of the glass, which will be a comfortable 4 or 5 metres away from the party wall. And in relation to the terrace, I can't do anything more but to say there is zero intention of a terrace. The design of the French doors is to match the other side architecturally. There is absolutely no, I don't know what else to say apart from I respect the condition. We wanted it there to give the satisfaction accordingly.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to extend that little segment.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, just to assist anyone who's watching, the way that the rules of this committee work is that only the councillors are able to ask questions. So that's why we occasionally we have slightly odd kind of conversations, because people can't cross question each other. Okay, so if we can now move on to the part of the meeting where we councillors are able to ask questions of officers. Would anyone like to go first? Tom, you go first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to confirm quickly. I assume that this structure is not visible from the street, but it seems like there are a number of properties which do overlook it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Because of the nature of the surrounding properties, it wouldn't be visible from the street, and because of the existing and approved the glass walkway, the views are restricted somewhat from the surrounding properties. The main properties that I would consider to be affected by it are those ones on Pelham Place.
Okay. And then, sorry, I'm just looking at a photo from Pelham Place. It looks like the buildings on the far side, which would that be Onslow Crescent, also have views, but you say they are partially restricted views. Yes,
that's correct. Obviously, they are higher properties, so there may be some from some longer private views.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bagchair.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my question is to officers is, I do appreciate that you can't visit sites all the time, but did you visit the site before this application to assess the points the objector raised?
I have not undertaken a site visit as part of the application myself as the case officer. However, I consider that there's sufficient information that has been provided as part of the application submission to allow for a determination.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Spalding.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms Long, two questions. You say the roof, it's a glass roof, but condition 23, use of the roof as a terrace precluded, but condition 15 refers to a roof terrace with black painted railings. That's the first question. Could you just clarify which is the terrace and which isn't? And would a glass roof ever be used as a terrace? Second question, condition 5E. Details of the glazed link element at first floor. I guess this is the glass walkway, which we're worried about. But where is the condition on the material, the glass material of the retractable roof? Should there be such a condition? And would we want to put on it that it shall be very translucent or nearly opaque as a glass roof to cut down the light transmission? Thank you.
Okay, so I can probably answer sort of both questions in one, if that's okay. So I think, as I mentioned at the start of my presentation, planning permission was granted for the development of the site back in 2019, and that permission has been implemented at the site. This application is relating solely to the retractable roof that I've shown in the presentation. So the condition 5 E that you reference, where it talks about the glazed link, that is actually referring to a separate element of the development that was approved as part of the original application. If I just take control briefly of this presentation, it's perhaps easiest if I scroll back briefly to an image. So here you can see on the image on the right, so the application that we are looking at today is about the curved roof in the foreground, and behind it you can see the glazed link. So that condition 5E is relating to that approved and implemented element of the scheme. So similarly, when we're talking about the metal railings, again, that's talking about an entirely separate part of the scheme. That was approved in 2019.
Shouldn't we put a condition like 5E on the retractable roof to cut down the light transmission for the same reason as we put it on the glass walkway?
So that is something that if you felt that it was necessary, we could add a condition to that effect to require some sort of film or glazing, if you considered that that would be appropriate in order to reduce any potential for light spillage. That would be something that you could do as part of this application.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Councillor Bennett, did you want to come back?
Sorry, yes, one more question, Chairman.
Yeah, just quickly.
Forgot to ask. Is there, do we have any policy, I sort of half remember, do we have any policy regarding the infill of gardens? I thought that there was some policy resisting that, and if so, why does that not come into play here?
So this application, in terms of, we're looking at it in terms of the character and appearance of the building and the wider conservation area and the impact on living conditions. This is slightly different in terms of it is still retaining the garden character because the remainder of the site is retained and retains its garden. This is enclosing an internal courtyard of the building, so it's a slightly different context and consideration. So it's not that they're not covering the entirety of the site. It is just looking to provide a retractable covering for the internal courtyard area.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Schmetling.
Thank you very much. Ms. Long, I'm just wondering, when you look at the objections, including the one that Ms. Huwa put in, but there's one from Ms. Capello, which speaks about the object looking like Queen Mary passing through. So the question is, why do you think it's not massive light pollution, whereas everybody else, or almost everybody else, seems to think it will be? So what convinced you it wouldn't be, given that we do have, as was mentioned, some guidelines on light pollution? Thank you.
The officer view is that it needs to be seen in its context. There is the glazed link that is currently existing behind that, and in that context, that it is a structure that would not cause harmful impact on living conditions of neighbouring properties. It's important to note, I feel, that it is an existing open courtyard area over which the council would have no control over its use in connection with a single residential dwelling. So I think it's those two elements resulted in the conclusion that it would have an acceptable impact for those reasons.
Do you think Councillor Spalding's suggestion would mitigate the problem? To what extent do you think it would mitigate the problem?
Yeah, obviously, if there is requiring further detail of any film or obscure glazing on that roof, then that could mitigate any potential harm. Another option available to councillors in terms of light pollution is that I note that condition 5B currently requires details of external lighting, and so that condition could be revised, or an additional condition could be attached which requires details of any lighting to be submitted to ensure that the levels of lighting are an acceptable level.
Thanks very much. I think that's well worth noting for our discussion shortly.
No, I think I agree, actually. Thank you. Colleagues, I think we can probably move to make a decision about this. Personally, it's a difficult one because clearly there is an existing planning permission, and that's an important material consideration. But I do take on board the points that the objector, Mrs. Huwa, made, and also colleagues Malcolm and Dorrie as well. I'm wondering if perhaps the condition 5 might be adjusted in some way to take account of what colleagues have just said. If I can just go back to Alison Long, actually, just quickly, I think that would be something that we could do, yes?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, as currently worded, it requires details to be submitted of external lighting. Obviously, that could be amended slightly to be clear in the details of the lighting within that internal courtyard as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel requiring colleagues, I think requiring the details to be submitted to officers, I think that's probably a reasonable way forward, I would suggest. I think perhaps suggesting that, you know, this proposed development might be a bit like the Queen Mary. Maybe that's pushing it a bit, but I do understand in a large enclosed area, residential area, that having a lot of light coming up into the sky, I can see that is something that legitimately a lot of people might sensibly be concerned about. So I would be inclined to say that we've got the recommendation to grant permission, but that we should note that condition 5 requires submission of details of exactly what is proposed. If I can just check perhaps with officers and also Ross Fletcher, who's from the legal department, is that a reasonable thing to put forward? Ross, do you think?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, as Alison has said, that would be fine to insert the relevant sections into condition 5 if you feel that would be necessary.
Okay. Can I just ask quickly, Tom Bennett and then Doris Schmetling.
Thanks, Chairman. No, I was just going to say quickly ahead of our decision that my main concern goes beyond the light, and it is actually the aesthetics of the structure even during daytime. And I know Thurlow and Smith's conservation area very well. I live in it, and I just can't convince myself that this structure is in keeping with it and preserves or enhances it. And I think if you compare it to even the new glass structure, the walkway behind it, which does have permission, I think this is, I mean, debate whether I would or not have voted in favour of granting permission for that. But I think this is definitely a step further away from the sort of design and general character of the area. So that's my main concern on this application.
Okay, I just colleagues, I just offer a quick comment on the point Tom's made. I mean, I think it's one of these things. I agree with you, and I also disagree with you. I mean, I absolutely. I think anybody would say, would it be possible in this location, very large, significant area within an important part of South Kensington, would it be possible to imagine something more attractive than this being brought forward? Yes. Does that necessarily mean that's what in front of us is unacceptable? And I suspect, I'm afraid that the answer is probably no. Probably has to be viewed as acceptable, bearing in mind the permission that is already there. That would be my own. And I think by addressing proper concerns by condition, I suspect is probably the right way forward. Dory, we need to move on really, but Dory, just quickly, what do you want to add?
Well, I mean, it is, I appreciate that we have other stuff to get through, but these are people's lives that are being affected. So I think one should have a minute or two extra. My question is also the screening that for the light, not just the lighting, but actually some sort of film that was mentioned, not to forget that. Mm-hmm. And gosh, just carry on for a minute. It's just slipped my mind for
okay, all right,
for a second.
But I think, Dory, I think the what you're saying in principle is that you agree that the conditions, were we to grant this, the conditions need to have things that have to be submitted to officers which address the kind of concerns that we've yes, heard this evening.
I remembered my point. Sorry, Chair. My point is, maybe I don't know how we can formulate this, but what about the offer by the applicant to still discuss the green wall with at least one objector? I mean, could that be an informative, or how could we incorporate that into the decision?
Well, I think the nature of the green wall would be covered by the conditions, because they would have to submit details about it. Can I?
Okay.
Sorry, can I just stop you there? Can I just check with officers that that is indeed right? That the conditions of the green wall have to be submitted?
That isn't currently on the recommendations, but again, that could be added as a condition should you wish.
But the consultation with objectives is what's important, not just that we look at it, but that the objectors have at least seen it.
Well, if we add a new condition to say that we require that, then obviously a condition has to be satisfied by the applicant, okay? And then that means the details are available publicly, and if somebody wished to object to it, then they could. Yeah.
Okay.
So all right. So So we have the proposed green wall is added as an extra condition. Okay, so I'm just scribbling this down for myself, and also condition 5 covers everything relating to the glazing. Okay. So I think we probably need to move to a vote now. So the proposal, the recommendation is to grant, subject to securing the undertaking, and also we have said that the details of the glazing have to be submitted, and that's part of condition 5. And I think we are also proposing that there's an additional condition that the details of the green wall also have to become a condition. So that means their details have to be approved as well. So that, colleagues, that is the proposal that I think we put in front of us all to vote on. So what I'd like to do is to go down the committee and to ask everyone if they're in favour of the recommendation with those amendments to the conditions or against. So Councillor Bakhtiar.
In favour, Chairman.
I'm sorry?
In favour.
Yeah, sorry, I beg your pardon, the line wasn't good. Councillor Bennett.
Chairman, taking on board the points you made earlier, but I still worry, even with this green wall, which we haven't seen plans for, it's still very theoretical, and I just can't overcome the fact that I think this will have a negative impact on the conservation area, so I will vote against. Okay,
Councillor Schmetling.
Well, I'm subject to this, the lighting, etc., including the idea of mitigating the amount of light, as Councillor Spalding suggested, with which I absolutely agree, then yes, I'm in favour, so long as that's clear in the conditions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spalding?
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. And with the changes to conditions, I'm in favour as well. So permission is granted, subject to the discussion that we've had. Very good, thank you. If we can now move on to consider the application at 53 Palace Gardens Terrace, and I think Sarah Gentry. Sarah, that's going to be you to present, yeah?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
So this application relates to a building which is on the corner of Palace Gardens Terrace and Brunswick Gardens. It's in use as 5 flats, and this application relates to the maisonette flat 1, which is located to the front portion of the ground floor and the lower ground floor of the building. There is a separate flat, flat 2, which is located to the rear of the building. These photographs show the existing building in more detail. You will note from the photos that there is an existing low boundary wall with metal railings set behind this to the existing frontage. This is the floor plan of the proposed basement. Planning permission is sought for a basement extension for flat 1, but that would extend the full depth of the property under flat 2 as well as the applicant's flat 1. An open light well is proposed and is marked on the drawing you can see. That would be 1 metre wide and extend to 1.4 metres wide on the Brunswick Gardens elevation. The basement would be less than 50% of the open area of the site, and it does comply with the other aspects of the accordance with policy CL7. I'm just going to show you now the drawings, the floor plan drawings. This is the lower ground floor plan with the existing drawing at the top and the proposed at the rear. The only thing really to note on this drawing is the new white light well at basement level and with guardrails enclosing it. And then moving up to the building, this is the ground floor existing at the top of the slide and then proposed ground floor at the bottom. This shows the position of the existing railings to the existing light well, which would remain, and with bottle balustrading added on the outer boundary wall. And to explain this better, we have the elevations and sections here, which show the changes to the proposed light well. At the top of the slides is the existing drawings, and they show the existing light well with a boundary wall on the outer side to the street, and then railings, and then dropping down to an existing light well, which is 1.5 metres deep. And then at the bottom of the slide, you have the proposed drawings and the proposed light well, which just shows the new bottle balustrades to the street on the outer edge, the railings retained, and then dropping down to a lowered light well. So the new lowered light well to the new basement would be 3 metres deep. So it would be 1.5 metres deeper than the existing light well. And then I've got here a photograph which just shows you the existing situation a bit closer up. And then we have here a drawing which shows the proposed, the photograph at the top shows the proposed relationship of this property to the other corner property on the other side of Brunswick Gardens, which you can just see doesn't have bottle balustrades. It has a low rendered wall, and then the photograph also shows that there are bottle balustrades on the adjoining property to the left there, and there is the proposed drawing showing those bottle balustrades on that boundary wall. It is recommended that planning permission is granted subject to conditions. It is also recommended that additional tree conditions are added to the list of conditions contained within the report to ensure that the street trees are adequately protected. And just the final thing I'd like to draw members' attention to is that an additional representation was received and has been circulated to members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. So if I could ask the two objectors, we've got Dr. Madari and also Mr. Craig. Perhaps if you'd like to go first, please, and you have up to 3 minutes shared between the two of you. So please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi, Mark. Shall I go ahead?
I think you should. I didn't realise our 3 minutes was shared. Yes. So you go and we'll see what's left.
Thank you, Mark. So my name is Dr. Farhan Ahmadari. I'm the joint owner of Flat 2 at 53 Palace Garden Terrace, along with Professor Madari. I've been appointed to speak on behalf of the other leaseholders of 53 and also the 3 leaseholders and the freeholder of 51 Palace Garden Terrace. We would ask the committee to consider planning policy where a basement flat owner wishes to dig under a basement flat owned by a third party in a multi-occupancy building. The CL7 speaks of unacceptable levels of disturbance, and this is obviously the case here where other people live in the building. There is, of course, a matter of safety to consider. We would point out that all the trial pits were dug within the interior of Flat 1, and no trial pits or survey was carried out in Flat 2. This is unacceptable. How can a plan for approval, as the report suggests, under building regulations or a Party Wall Act be agreed without investigation? Is the committee really going to let the applicant dig blind and deal with issues that arise afterwards? Also, trial pit 1 was dug without a party wall agreement. And can the committee really condone an application based on data obtained in this way? And council's experts permitted to rely on the data in assessing the safety and stability issues covered in the CMS. So is the council not making itself liable to legal action by endorsing data obtained in this way if it grants planning permission? Digging under Flat 2 will create only uninhabitable space. This has no place in a residential building and offers no public benefit. The National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 195, is clear. The committee should refuse consent. The applicant's new light well will create a double-deck staggered arrangement, negating the historic character of the building, which is in breach of the council's own basement supplementary planning document, which states where there are existing front light wells, the further deepening of these light wells to provide light to a new basement underneath can have adverse visual impact and be harmful to the character and or appearance of the conservation area. The design of the light well is ill-considered and clumsy and has a jarring impact on the building and the street scene. Where the existing light well curves gently, the new light well has a truncated corner offset at an awkward angle, exacerbated by the addition of a further set of railings not matching the existing ones. The effect is visual clutter and damage to the historic character of the building. Another shallow set of windows, particularly under the bay, displaces the Victorian window hierarchy of the terrace, unbalancing the original architectural composition of the building. The proposal would create a poor stacking arrangement extending under the full footprint of the building and under bedrooms in my flat. The non-habitable space is to be a cinema or gym, but the committee report recommends no soundproofing to mitigate the excessive noise and disturbance in my flat. The council's transport officer raises 5 concerns and recommends that the applicant examine other CTM.
I think I'm sorry. I'm going to have to. I'm going to have to stop you there.
Yep.
You've gone over time, Mr. Crick. Just in a couple of sentences, is there anything you'd like to add to what has been said?
I think the drawing gives you a good idea of the huge tonnage of soil that will be removed. I'd ask you all to consider, if I were coming to move that much soil from under your homes next week, how would you sleep? I remember Durham Terrace, which collapsed recently. It was in a terrace. It was supported by the buildings. Nobody was living there. Thank God. There will be people living here. And I don't think it's going to be a very comfortable couple of years to sleep over this dungeon being dug under the feudal leasehold system. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Now, there may well be questions from colleagues on the committee. But can I now ask the agent for the applicant, Paul Lofthouse, are you with us? Yeah?
Hello.
Yeah, hi. So in similar fashion, you've got the same time, which actually has turned out to be about 3.5 minutes. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Paul Lofthouse from Haynes Phillips Architects, speaking as the applicant's agent in support of the application. The proposals are to enlarge the existing 2-bed masonry under the footprint of the existing building in order to create a larger family dwelling. Our client intends to develop the flat for the use of his daughter, a doctor who works in the borough and who would otherwise struggle to afford a family home in the area. The scheme has been developed through a detailed pre-app and design development phase with a project team including a chartered structural engineer and arboriculturist. At Haynes Phillips, we have successfully completed a number of basement developments in the borough, including on Palace Gardens Terrace, Brunswick Gardens and Royal Crescent. We've taken on board comments from the planning department in preparing the proposals before you, and as far as possible, the comments from adjoining owners following our neighbour consultation. The proposed basement will be very discreet, set below an existing light well, behind the proposed traditional painted metal guard railings, below a changing level down from the pavement, and the proposed boundary bottle balustrades. As described in the planning officer's report, the proposed bottle balustrades, the boundary wall, will mostly conceal the light well from view, as is the case with other existing light wells along Palace Gardens Terrace. Adding these bottle balustrades will improve the external appearance of the property and bring the boundary treatment in line with the prevailing character of the street. Trial pits and a borehole investigation have taken place to inform the construction methodology in order to preserve the structural stability of the building and to minimise disruption. The works will be overseen by a chartered engineer, if approved, and carried out by a contractor signed to the considerate constructor scheme, as is required by the relevant planning condition. Building regulations and party wall processes will deal with matters outside of the purview of planning considerations, such as foundation, structural stability, drainage and ventilation. The construction traffic management plan will be further developed prior to commencing works, and the contractor will liaise with the council construction management team during the course of the works in order to minimise disruption to neighbouring occupiers and traffic flow, all as required by the relevant planning conditions. The planning officer's report states that the proposals would preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area and are compliant with all the relevant planning policies and recommends approval. We respectfully request that the committee approves the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Excuse me. So colleagues, questions to either the objectors or the applicant. Mo, you go first.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I will start with Dr. Madari first. We are here to listen to your concerns. We have 21 objectors to this application, but at the same time, we have to balance the right of the property owner, the applicant, the right of enjoyment of the property and improvement of the property, and listening to your concerns. If we were going to balance it right, I personally would like to know, along with my colleagues tonight, we would like to know if we were going to grant this application, what type of conditions would you like to see? Do you think any condition would remedy your concerns?
Well, I mean, it's a most unusual application, as you can see, because
Indeed.
it's not a property that's primarily owned by the freeholder. So this is something that's, you know, there have been cases where people have tried to do this, and there's been massive opposition, as you can imagine. And we have sought legal advice, and we will oppose the plans in any case. But for me, the fact that the extension goes underneath a flat that's not owned by this gentleman is really the main issue. That somebody's actually digging under my flat is unacceptable. You know, there's a massive disturbance to people living above, and I really have concerns for the structural stability of the building, because we have sought professional advice. The investigations that have been done haven't been sufficient. They haven't taken into consideration the fact that there've been other, there's been other extensions to the building beyond the original Victorian foundations, and the look of the building will really be altered. It's you know, you can't dispute this. It's a very distinctive street, a beautiful road that we all love, you know, and it's not going to look the same. That part of Palace Garden Terrace will not look the same.
Thank you. Chairman, may I ask another question to Mr. Craig?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Mark, we didn't listen to your concerns directly. I would like to ask you a question and to listen to your concerns because you didn't have time. Could you tell us, and the same question goes for yourself, if we are going to grant it, what type of conditions do you think will remedy your concerns?
Well, I certainly, there's already a basement under the building. Going down into a sub-basement does become very worrying. There's been issues already in Palace Gardens Terrace with residents of a similar structure being trapped in their homes. You may recall that from some years back. So we know that the soil there is unpredictable. Certainly, if the excavations were restricted to purely underneath the applicant's property and not underneath the rest, that would be some improvement. But the application coming after we leaseholders applied for an enfranchisement makes me suspicious of the motives. It sounds very cuddly that his daughter will be living now with busy doctor.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but he's already put the flat for sale a few months ago, and you know we have evidence of that. Yeah. So I know that's not a planning issue, but just so you're aware of that.
Thank you.
So does that answer your question, Councillor Batia?
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Good. Okay. Are there any other questions? Councillor Schmetling.
Thanks. Can I just establish, does the developer, I suppose, let me ask the developer, the applicant first. Does the developer own the freehold?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, I guess that's an insight into that they can dig under other leaseholders, but it is a major concern, the stability of the building, and I take it that whatever you may or may not have done so far, and it seems the objectives are a bit unsure of the degree of testing you've done and investigation you've done, is what assurance will you give them, could you give them, that everything will be done to make sure the stability remains, and what sort of, I know it's not a planning matter necessarily, it's a civil matter, what sort of, well, party wall type agreements would you offer? Because it's, I mean, I understand fully the concerns if somebody's going to dig under the whole building into make another basement of what is, well, kindly called the lower ground floor, but is already a basement.
Well, I guess I would just say that obviously it's in our client's interest as the freeholder to preserve the structural integrity of the building. It's not in his interest for anything untoward to happen to the building. And obviously the planning policy has significant requirements for construction methodology for the works to be overseen by a chartered engineer. Beyond that, obviously the party wall processes are separate from planning, but those will have to take place, and full structural investigations will have to take place, and the structural works agreed with the adjoining owners. So all of those normal processes will go ahead, and the applicant, our client, will see those through and build out the works, as has been done in many other similar properties in the vicinity, most of which have been carried out successfully without significant long-term effects on the buildings.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the objectors, either Dr. Moderai or Mr. Crick. First of all, do you feel a little bit reassured about the stability of the building, if that they what the measures they will take? But because you can see that, I mean, they own the freehold, so they can do what they like, sort of thing, I think. So the fact that dig under another leasehold property is, well, that's a civil matter anyway, it's not a planning matter. And most of the objections seem to relate to the disruption caused during the works, which again is not a planning matter. We try to mitigate through rules, if you like, about construction. So do you, as objectors, feel that there's some comfort in having what the applicant, what Mr. Lofthouse said about the party wall agreements and about checking for stability of the building?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned in what I was saying, not really, because there's never, as you know, these problems occur afterwards, and there's never a guarantee, irrespective of whatever investigations have been done. But the investigations that have been submitted are not sufficient, in my opinion, for that to happen, for you to grant the permission. I don't know.
Well, we can ask the officers. We can ask when we later come to talk about the officers, we can see whether some sort of condition could be applied to give you more assurance. But we'll come to that later.
I mean, the other thing is really with respect, and I know you're very professional people and you're trying to work within the conditions that you've got, but ultimately what this means is that any freeholder can buy the sort of lower ground floor flat and dig under people's home there is a difference between digging in your own building and in a building where there's multiple occupancy, is there not?
Well, I'm afraid that's not a planning consideration.
Sure.
Our consideration is, does it fit into the conservation area? Does it?
I mean, again, it's a matter of opinion, but I personally don't think it does. And I've spoken to professionals.
The issue that you've raised is not a planning consideration. They can dig that. Digging holes in the ground is not in principle illegal.
No,
it's not prohibited.
No, but the look of the building will be. The light wells are not going to. They won't look right.
Do you not think that the light wells will be reasonably hidden from the street anyway?
No,
and
I think it's just going to look very odd, really, because it's not in keeping with what's around the area. If you look around those streets, there's nothing of the sort there.
I mean, this is a landmark building beg pardon. It's a landmark building on a corner which previously had a very beautiful garden around it. The trees have been removed despite the provision in the planning notice. And the creation of a light well is further removal of that garden. I don't think you can call it a garden when it's 9 meters down or whatever the distance is. Jumping in.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Bakhtiar, just a very quick last point before we move on. Mo.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll say this to the objectors. We see this kind of applications constantly, so we know what's in front of us is legal. That's why we are asking you questions, and I'm repeating the same question. What type of conditions, what condition would you like to see to make sure we will make you, so everyone is happy? But I haven't heard any conditions.
I mean, really,
you are asking us that we cannot go to do that. Yes.
Sorry, I spoke.
Yes.
Could you
please, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the disturbance that's going to be caused within our flat is really, you can imagine that somebody who's living there, it's not really going to be possible to live there when they're doing the work.
Do you think if we say, okay, let me suggest something. We had cases in the past. We prevented the applicant to use machineries and diggers on vibrating stuff. So the digging would have been by hand or smaller machineries. Do you think that would help?
Well, I suppose it's better than nothing. But ultimately, if there's any possibility for them not to, as Mark said, for them to solely dig underneath the freeholder's flat, that's really would seem more reasonable to me. The other thing is that the area underneath my flat is classed as non-habitable, so it's going to be, I would imagine it's going to be a cinema room of some sort. So again, the sort of ventilation issues and the noise issues around that, even once it's finished, is going to be a complete nightmare. We bought that flat on the basis that there's not going to be anybody below or above us, and now that's not going to be the case. So it's a complete nightmare, as you can imagine.
I do think, Councillor Bakhtiar, anything that reduces vibration, because obviously that will further endanger the structure, a condition that reduces that would be better than no condition on that.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you everyone for that. The committee, we now need to move on to consideration where only the councillors are able to ask officers. So if I can thank everyone who's spoken, but we need to move on. Mark, I'm sorry, did you have a final very quick point? Sorry, I didn't see you there.
No, Chair, we're moving on. I'm really pleased we're moving
exactly.
on.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, in that case, Markham, that next part of our discussion, do you want to lead off on that?
Well, of course, one sympathises entirely with the objectors, but if somebody owns some land underground, they can develop it, and that's not a planning issue. They own it, and we don't consider that. What we look at is the end product when it gets there. Is it, does it fit in, and so on. So the only control we've got over the process is through things like the construction management scheme. And I was just going to ask the officers, looking at conditions 5 and 6, if this was going to happen directly under me, and it has done actually, my basement flat was dug out and waterproofed and so on, so I've lived through this. I just wonder if would it be reasonable to put some conditions on this about not using heavy pneumatic machinery and limiting the hours of work and the kind of things that are going to mitigate the noise and vibration for the people who live above this basement to be developed. Can we tighten up on conditions 5 and 6, and how far can we go? That's my question to the officers.
I think actually Markham, that's a good question. Maybe if I can ask Sarah Gentry or maybe Lisa Chung, would you like to address that?
Yes, I can start, and Lisa Chung may want to add to my comments. Yes, this is something, certainly noise and vibration is something that would be covered under condition 6. The applicant has also already submitted a noise and vibration checklist, which addresses some of these issues. And within that, they have said that the excavation would be done partially by hand and partially by mini mechanical excavators. And specifically, they have said that the excavation adjacent to the party wall would be done by hand. So that is something which I know that they have already addressed in their statement and could be controlled by condition.
Okay.
Can I just speak for a second? There's no mention of any soundproofing either in this sort of cinema room.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We've moved on to a part of the meeting where it's only councillors and officers who are able to speak. But we've heard the points that you've made. We do accept what you say. Okay, so actually, can I ask a couple of questions? First of all, I'd say that actually it's a long time ago, but I actually lived in a very small flat quite near here, near Palace Gardens Terrace, and it's a lovely area, and there are beautiful cherry trees in the area, and the buildings, they're lovely old buildings. If I can just ask officers a couple of things. First of all, condition 4, management of engineering works. If I can just check that really covers all of those points that have been made about structural safety, because obviously if I was a leaseholder above where the proposed works were going to take place, that's obviously something that I would view as of vital importance. I can just check that that condition does cover all of these things. Also, can I ask actually about trees? Sorry, maybe I'm being dim, but is there a condition that says that the protection of trees is part of the application? So I can't immediately, maybe I've overlooked it. I don't know, Sarah, is there something there actually that I'm overlooking?
Dealing with the trees first, yes. Those conditions were not listed in the list of conditions in the report. So my last slide gave these two additional conditions.
Oh yes, sorry,
recommending.
You're quite right. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at the paper report in front of me. Okay, so we've got those. Okay, and I think the other matters that have been raised, it strikes me, are really they're really quite a lot of party wall agreement matters, but they're not planning matters. Is that right? If I can just check that with officers.
Yes, I mean, we do have a policy which obviously tries to address these matters as far as we can, as far as is reasonable, and that is why we do require this submission of the construction method statement to try and address those matters. But yes, you're correct, they are primarily covered under the Party Wall Act and rather than the Planning Acts. And just your specific question about condition 4, yes, that does require a qualified engineer to actually be appointed, and the key thing is to supervise the works, and that they need to submit those details to the local authority.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Well, colleagues, any other questions to officers? Otherwise, I think we can move to make a decision.
I have questions.
Okay, Dory, yeah, go on.
Did we, I'm sorry if I missed it, did we say there is a condition or could apply a condition to use smaller machinery to mitigate the vibrations and so on during the works? Did we say, first of all, that's the first question. Did we say we could do that? Is it already in there somewhere? Because it doesn't look like it's under 6.
There's not a specific condition requiring that. It's covered to some extent by the Code of Construction Practice, which would require details of how noise and so on are managed on site, but it's not a specific condition. Members could add that if they felt that that was appropriate.
I mean, giving details is fine, but it doesn't mean that anything's done about it. So I think we should maybe consider applying that because of the nature of the building. I'm not suggesting in any case. Second thing is, so we can do that. Second thing is the sound question, although it was mentioned, it occurred to me anyway, that there is no noise transmission condition. Now, it's a difficult one. It's not for us to speculate what rooms might be used for. Obviously, it's not a planning matter. But is there any way we can apply our standard noise condition, at least the one which is relative to ambient in any way, in this case, before once it's the work's finished?
Yes, I don't see, it wouldn't be, the way that we would phrase it is that we would require details of soundproofing to be submitted and approved, and then we would consult with our environmental health officers who would look at the detailing. Obviously, it is covered by building regulations in any case, but we certainly we can add that condition as an extra safeguard in that form.
Thank you. That could be useful. I mean, I live in a converted villa in a flat there, and the sound installation is terrible because it's never done properly. But So that, yes, that could give comfort. I don't know what it's like in, you know, in 53 Palace Gardens Terrace, but I think as a comfort, I would consider adding that. Yes, we can discuss that.
Okay, all right. I think that's helpful. So, okay, so if I can try and conclude this and round it up. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission, obviously with all the conditions that are there already. I think we note the conditions about trees, which Sarah's put in front of us there. We also, if we add a condition relating to soundproofing in a way that Councillor Schmetterling has just outlined, okay, and then I think...
And machinery.
Sorry, Mo, yeah?
And the machinery used to minimize the vibration.
Yes, agreed.
Yes. Well, I think vibration, that's included in the construction method statement, which is already one of the main conditions in the report. So that's included anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was said we could explicitly add something. The officer said we could explicitly add something for that. Didn't you?
Well, I think vibration is fairly fundamental to the nature of engineering work.
It's the machinery, I think. Maybe that's what I meant. The machinery,
yeah.
Really.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah. Okay. All right. Very quickly. If I can just invite colleagues. I mean, obviously, it's important to remember that saying that things have to be hand dug means it goes on for longer. All right. Using machines, it means it can be done quicker. If I can just very quickly with colleagues go down the table, whether you're in favour of saying hand digging, sort of hand tools, or whether you accept that there's some mechanical, just, I don't know, Mo, back to you.
Yes, I think, Chairman, I think some mechanical is acceptable where necessary, but mainly dug by hand to minimize the damage.
Councillor Bennett, Tom?
Yes, likewise. I think we sort of made it quite clear to officers that we want conditions which will minimise any vibrations, but I don't think completely outlawing mechanical is necessary.
All right. I mean, I think that's a fair point. Councillor Schmetterling?
I agree with that. I mean, I've experienced jackhammers in digging across the road, so no jackhammers, small machinery, maybe yes. Yeah.
Councillor Spalding?
Chairman, if it helps, I remember a case that was right next door to a dental surgery.
Yes, I remember that as well.
I remember that one, and we put a condition on that there should be no pneumatic heavy drilling machinery unless within certain specific hours as agreed with the neighbours.
Yes.
And so I don't know if the officers can, if that's too complex for a condition, it's either a blanket no pneumatic machinery or only to be used by agreement, within limited hours.
I think, unfortunately, Malcolm, that I remember that particular case well, but I'm afraid it got struck out on appeal. So unfortunately, it didn't work really.
It's a condition beyond what we can do.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. Okay. Well, in that case, colleagues, I think we need to reach a decision about this. So I propose that the recommendations to grant, I think we note the extra conditions about trees, and we also are going to add, and officers will formulate the exact details, a condition about soundproofing, which I think is important. I understand exactly what the neighbours have said. So that package, can I go down the table, please, and ask metaphorically, if people are in favour of that recommendation to grant or against. So Councillor Bhatia.
In favour with the conditions we've mentioned, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bennett.
Turn your mic on.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out just for a second.
Yeah,
in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetling.
In favour.
Councillor Spalding.
In favour.
Thank you, Malcolm, and I'm in favour as well. So that's granted, but with all of those conditions attached following our discussion. Thank you very much indeed. So can we now move on to consider 1 to 2 Cornwall Mews West? And I think Alison Long is going to present that. So Alison.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application site is located on Cornwall Mews West and comprises a Mews property in use as a single residential dwelling. As well as the frontage onto Cornwall Mews West, as seen on plan and in the images here, the building also fronts onto Kelso Place to the rear. The application seeks planning permission for the demolition of the interior walls and floor whilst maintaining the front and rear elevations, together with the construction of a basement, replacement mansard roof and associated alterations to openings to both the front and rear elevations. This slide shows the existing ground first and roof plans of the building and also includes a 1972 plan of the building with a layout including a door onto Kelso Place. Here the proposed floor plans are shown, including the new single-storey basement level underneath the footprint of the dwelling and the replacement mansard. No external manifestations are proposed for the basement, which is located entirely under the footprint of the building. Here is the Cornwall Mews West elevation, and this slide shows the existing and proposed elevation of the building. This highlights the proposed changes to the ground and first floor openings, as well as the replacement mansard roof. To Kelso Place, this slide shows the existing proposed rear elevation of the building. Again, this highlights the proposed changes to the ground and first floor openings, as well as the replacement mansard roof. To the right of the image is a 1972 elevation of the building, again including a door onto Kelso Place. Here is the existing and proposed sections of the building shown in relation to the proposed single-storey basement and mansard roof. As noted previously, no external manifestations are proposed for the basement, which will be located entirely under the footprint of the dwelling. There is an existing terrace at the front of the building at roof level, and this would be retained. Extracts from the draft CTMP are included here for information. The proposal is for vehicles to enter the site from Cornwall Mews West only, with no access from Kelso Place. The officer recommendations to grant planning permission for the proposal, subject to the recommended conditions included within the report, which also includes a submission of a final CTMP prior to commencement of development. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the speakers for this case have decided to withdraw, so we move straight to questions to officers. I wanted to start off the questions by I want to clarify the things that have changed from the previous applications which were withdrawn, and also, well, going back, things were refused, but particularly things that have been withdrawn relatively recently. So can you help me with that?
Yes, of course. So there's an application that was withdrawn that sought permission to demolish the building in its entirety. Now the front and rear facades of the building would be retained, so it's only the interior parts of the building that would be removed. And then secondly, another application was withdrawn. That one was perhaps most similar to the current application, but changes have been made to the appearance of the openings to the front elevation to provide a building which was considered more in keeping with the character of a Mews property.
Okay, all right. Colleagues, any questions? Any questions about this? No? Councillor Schmetling.
Yeah, okay, let's. Oh, sorry, I just pressed the wrong button again. Hang on. Right. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, given this is, well, where would the construction traffic be? Would it go into Kelso Place? Or was it all on the main, sort of on the, not in Kelso Place? Because, I mean, the worry is, I suppose, as usual, what about the traffic? I know there's a traffic management plan, but, you know, is that under proper control? Because the Mews, it's the Mews that's always the problem, getting traffic in and out of the Mews.
So the draft CTMP, as you can see on this plan, proposes for the access to the site to be entirely from Cornwall Mews West, with no access from Kelso Place. The draft CTMP is considered to be an acceptable in draft form and demonstrates that the vehicles can enter the site, maintaining sufficient road width, whilst also maintaining access for vehicles within the Mews. Condition is recommended, which would secure the submission of a final CTMP prior to commencement of the works. Yes, thank you. It's just interesting that there are so many objections to this, even though it doesn't appear to be such a major change, although, of course, it's a construction project in a very tight area. But, you know, why do you think that is? I mean, I can see what they are, but it just seems interesting that there's so many objections to this. Any comments? I mean, I can't comment. I mean, lots of the comments are, from reading the objections, are about the access to Kelso Place. A lot of the objections come from Kelso Place properties. But I think, as I said, it'd be clear that no access is proposed from Kelso Place. Lots of the comments are about the door, but that is historic. It may just be a case of there's been lots of numerous applications, and it's kind of we're now down to the third application at the site. But yeah, I can't really comment on further on exactly why it's generated so many objections. Sure. And finally, thank you very much. And finally, if we look at, you know, the summary objection number 23 about the noise, I mean, can we again discuss the kind of machinery to be used for this? Because these tiny places are not suitable for big construction projects, but this is, relatively speaking. Can we do something about that? Again, with the previous item, that's something that we could do if you consider it necessary. I mean, I would say it's a, as basements go, it's a relatively small, it is policy compliant, and the applicants have demonstrated that it can be done safely, and obviously we put conditions on to limit noise as far as possible. Yeah, okay. I mean, okay, we can discuss that in a minute, because I'm quite interested in having some sort of mitigation in these Mews. You know, again, jackhammers are a nightmare. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? No. Okay. All right. In that case, I think we need to reach a decision about this. I think as Councillor Schmetling has said, it's absolutely true that basements, particularly in Mews type locations and other small cul-de-sac streets, is something which is extremely difficult, and it can be disruptive to people. I think, unfortunately, in planning terms, the precedents are not very favourable. CTMPs have been approved for locations which I think most people would regard as extremely difficult and tight locations, and I think that's frankly just a fact that we have to accept, because obviously there has to be a consistency in decision making. Are there any particular points that any other colleagues would like to make about this? Otherwise, I think we should probably move to take a decision. No?
Well,
Okay.
Chair, are we willing to consider this machinery type condition?
Well, we
had for the previous case.
Well, Dory, we could. I mean, I can invite. I mean, maybe I can put it this way, colleagues. Councillor Schmetterling, it's a perfectly reasonable point, and I'm sure is supported by some residents, saying we should put in a condition about use of machinery. Does anyone wish to support that? Is that something that
I would love to, Chairman. I would love to support you.
Sorry, you would like to support? Okay. Yes. Anyone else?
Gone quiet.
I'm unsure, depending on sort of what it would be. I don't know exactly what the condition would be.
Yeah.
Same as before.
No, thank you, Councillor Bennett. I think the truth is it would be a difficult thing in this particular circumstance, I think, to put forward. Okay, so in that case, if I can put the recommendation to the vote. So recommendation is to grant with the conditions set out in the report. If I can go down, Councillor Baccia, are you in favour or not?
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetterling?
In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Spalding?
In favour.
And I'm in favour as well. So that's granted with the conditions set out. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Chair, we have a little break. Do you think we've been at it for an hour?
Well, actually, Doric, we're going to have a break for you because the next item is the limes, which I think you said you were going to step aside for. Yes.
Well, yes, indeed.
Right?
Yes,
right?
I did. I do want to step out of it,
okay,
but I just thought
right.
everybody else might want a short break at some point.
Meetings
are not normally held for more than an hour and a half to two.
Yeah. I don't know how do just very quickly. Anyone else like anyone else like a quick break now?
Literally a 2-minute break would be.
Let's stop for two. No, let's stop. Yeah. Okay, Tom.
You'll need 5 realistically at least to go to the loo and back.
Tom, let's just pause for about 5 minutes, everyone, and then we'll start again with considering the limes in Linden Gardens. Okay, all right. Hi, can I just check, colleagues, who's back online? I can see Malcolm there. Malcolm?
I'm here.
And Tom's here, yeah?
Yeah.
And Mo as well. Okay, because yeah, Dory is going to sit out the next item. So I think, tell me, Sarah Gentry, Sarah, you're there, yeah?
Yes, I am.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. But in that case, I think we can proceed to the next item, which is the limes. So Sarah, when you're ready, do you want to introduce this?
This application relates to the Limes development, which is located on the eastern side of Linden Gardens. It's understood that the development comprises of 7 houses and 34 flats. And there is a main entrance to the flats on Linden Gardens. And then to the side of the development, there is a side access road, which gives access to the car park to the rear and some of the dwellings, including 36A, 36B and 36C. And you can just see in the photograph on the slide here, the car park, which is to the rear of the main building. And planning permission is sought for the installation of pedestrian and vehicular gates across this side access road. The gates would be simple black metal railings with a vehicular gate and then a separate pedestrian gate. They've been proposed to the applicant states to reduce antisocial behaviour and misuse of the car park by non-residents. The gates would be set back from the road to avoid obstructing the highway. The council does have a policy, CR1, which resists the gating of streets and the development of gated communities. And planning permission was refused for gates in this location last year for this reason, because it was contrary to this policy, CR1. The difference between the previous refusal and the current proposal is this current proposal proposes to keep the pedestrian gate open during the day from 7 AM to 7 PM. And this would be controlled by condition and is seen as an acceptable compromise. And this application is now therefore granted for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a couple of speakers for this. If I can first ask, I think Mrs. Fleming and also Mrs. Hinton, I think you are registered as objectors. So if I can ask you to please go ahead sharing 3 minutes whenever you're ready, that would be good. Thank you.
Shall I go first? Cordelia Fleming.
Hello. Yes, please, yes.
I object to these gates for 2 main reasons. I live in one of the houses that's next door to the proposed gates. And as it was mentioned, there are 3 houses that are only accessible through the car park entrance. And I'm concerned the gates will hinder our free movement to and from our properties. We're not linked to the main building or the intercom system at the Limes. So our access to and from our homes is quite unique. And a reason for buying the property was due to its open community feel. And I feel the gates will make the area feel more like a campus or gated community rather than a collection of homes off a quiet cul-de-sac in a beautiful conservation area. I also think waiting cars will add noise and pollution to my flat and home. Secondly, I feel the gates should only ever be a final hard option. Once a gate is in, very unlikely it will be removed. And I feel that other options haven't been explored, such as better lighting and clever use of planting, which often have a much more far-reaching positive effect and increased community well-being, which I don't think a gate can do. The current lighting at the Limes is inefficient very dark, and it's a security scare for sure. When I take my bins out at night, I'm often nervous and scared as the area around the limes is dark and badly lit. And we're all very well aware that badly lit areas attract crime and antisocial behaviour. So I feel that, yeah, a gate is a hard option, and that softer, often better options haven't been explored. And I'll hand over to Mary.
Right, yes. Now, on our public comment, been living in the limes for over 20 years, we strongly feel that installing gates should be a last resort once other security measures such as CCTV or better security lighting have been properly explored. To date, and to our knowledge, no alternatives have been trialled at the limes, although a private scheme to fine unauthorised parking has been in place for some time and has been successful in reducing an instance of this nature, according to our managing agents. With regard to criminal and antisocial behaviour, we feel that we have not been presented with any systematic record reflecting the nature or extent of this activity sufficient to warrant the implementation of security gates. And while we appreciate our neighbours' concerns around crime and abuse of access, we would welcome a more thorough investigation into alternative and less drastic means of addressing these perceived problems.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that. So can I now ask representatives of the applicant? So we've got Mr. Maloney and also supporting the application, Dr. Malenivan. I apologise if I've mispronounced your name, sir. So between the two of you, you also have up to 3 minutes to speak. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Miles, do you wish to speak first?
No, you carry on. You carry on, Aidan. First, and then I'll come.
My name's Aidan Maloney from Smith Baxter Surveyors, acting as the agent on behalf of the Residents Association and their agent Aspects Property Management. As the previous planning officer had mentioned, the previous application was refused because of various reasons regarding policies at the council. We resubmitted and had a pre-app meeting with one of the planning officers to discuss the installation of the gates and to answer some of the queries and objections raised by the two previous speakers. The soft measures have proven not to work, and there is a dummy CCTV camera system already in place. Signage is there. Lighting could also work in the opposite angle in causing light pollution if it's aggressive lighting, even if it was positioned to avoid other neighbours. The option of putting the gates in with the pass gate as a pedestrian gate and the restriction or condition applied for the operation of that gate is acceptable in terms of mitigating all the antisocial behaviour that has increased over a number of years. And I think there was also a written objection from one neighbour in Clanrigard Gardens that actually emphasises the use and misuse of the garden and access, in that they presumed that the gardens at the rear of the limes were communal rather than private, as is the driveway. I'll hand over to, I recommend obviously that the report and the application to the councillors. I'll hand over to Miles now.
Thank you, Aidan. Good evening, all. I'm the chairman of the Limes Managing Committee, and I'm chairman of the board. And we did a survey sometime last year asking people what do they think about the gates, and out of 31 replies we had, there were 26 for and 5 were against. I can understand some of the concerns raised, but the main principal reason is security. There was a couple of incidents when a couple of the people in the houses opened their doors. There was a person standing with a knife who got in some or the other. And also a few years ago when we had a resident porter, during the carnival time, he got badly hit and assaulted, and he needed a prolonged period of medical care. And also, I can understand the lighting business, and some of the residents have complained to us that they find it difficult to come out in the night because they are not sure whether who is going to be hanging around.
I'm afraid, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because unfortunately the time is up, and you'll understand we have to.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah.
We have to offer equal time to both parties, but it may well be that there are colleagues who would like to ask questions. If I can ask, actually, Councillor Bennett, Tom, you look ahead with the first question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Two quick questions to the applicants. The first one is regarding entrance. Oh, sorry, I think someone's maybe not on mute, by the way, because there's a lot of background noise. Mrs. Fleming, perhaps. I think you're thank you very much. Fantastic. The first one was to the applicant. In terms of access through the gate after 7 p.m, I assume the properties which aren't part of the main building will be given fobs or keys. But if they have guests coming, how will they get in? Because I think that was an issue that they were raising. Is there any way of connecting them to the intercom? That's the first question.
If I could answer that question, obviously fobs, we need to explore the methodology of how access is granted. The main building has an intercom system, and it's quite possible that might well be extended to the houses as well, so that there's a direct link to the pass gate or pedestrian gate. Other than that, it would be on a key fob system where spare fobs could be provided to guests when they attend.
Okay, and then second one, I think Mr. Malver.
Sorry, am I allowed to add to that? Because I'm living in a house 36A and we're not connected.
No, I'm afraid I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's only for councillors to ask questions to someone, and obviously, other people can't kind of join in, if you like. So, sorry about that. But Tom, do you have anything further you wanted to add?
Yeah, sorry, it was just, I think Mr. Mulvahan was about to cover it earlier, but in terms of the lighting, objectors have said that more could have been done to discourage harm on lighting. Have you attempted that in any way?
No, that has been considered by the board, and it will be put into action. I think the lockdown has put a lot of spanner in our works over the last year, so that will be sorted out by the managing the aspect management. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then, sorry, one more, if I may, Chairman.
Of course.
Thank you to Ms. Fleming. So yeah, regarding the access, I was perhaps putting words slightly in your mouth. What are your concerns around access, in particular, after 7 p.m?
My concerns are that I would have to physically exit my property to let them in to the gate. In terms of handing out fobs to potential guests, you still have to exit your property to give someone a fob. It just adds a clunkiness and an extra a layer of just nuisance, and it's something I don't think that the planners have necessarily factored in for the new houses whose sole access to their properties is through the car park entrance.
Okay, whereas the main building there's separate access which is controlled by intercom, so this wouldn't affect guests to the main building. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
that's all from me.
Thanks, Tom. Any other questions, Markham? Do you have anything? I don't. No. Okay. Well, in that case, thank you very much for speaking. So we now, as you've seen earlier, we now move on to the next section of the meeting, where it's for members of the committee to ask officers questions. Who would like to go first on that on that part? Anybody? No. Okay. Well, I'll start in that case. Can I just ask, Mrs. Gentry? I just ask. It seems to me that this is quite a difficult decision, because on the face of it, generally speaking, we don't really like creating new gated areas, but I think as set out in the report, I feel, you know, I can see a justification for this, and while there are people who are opposed to it, it sort of seems to me, you know, I can understand why there might well be a majority of people living there who supported these gates. Do you have any additional comments? Are there any additional conditions that we could put on at all? I don't know. Question for you.
Yes, I mean, I think we've acknowledged, as you say, we've acknowledged within the officer's report that this is quite a delicate sort of balancing act that has to be struck between, it's really between two key sort of interests: the openness of the open access to the houses and to the area to the rear, and balancing that against the desire of other residents for safety and so on within their home. And that's why, you know, as I said, the application was originally refused, and it's only with this condition which proposes that the gate should stay open during the daytime that is felt to be an acceptable condition, which would mean that we felt we were able to recommend approval. I'm not sure that there are any other conditions that would help with this. None come to mind that would really help.
I agree. I accept that. Well, colleagues, I think in that case, I suggest that we take a. Actually, Tom, sorry, you just popped up there, Tom.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman.
No.
It was just on this point of that some of the residents in the houses will have to leave their house in order to let people come in after 7 p.m. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it right. But residents in the main block won't have to, because there's an entrance which doesn't require them to go through the gate. Am I correct in saying that? I just want to make sure I understand it properly.
That's my understanding as well. You can see in the photographs, maybe it doesn't show up so well in that photograph, in this, in the bottom right-hand photograph. I don't know if you can maybe not see very well, but there is an entrance to the flats. Yes, I assume that would be accessible. It is these three houses, these three properties that would have the difficulty of having to provide visitors access to that. I think the difficulty is that is primarily a management issue. It's obviously, we're recommending the condition to keep the gates open, but I would be reluctant to suggest that we should try and control that in any further detail. I think that would be difficult to do by condition or other means.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose you could have something around it. Yeah. Okay. I see. It might go beyond a planning consideration. Thank you.
I think personally, I think the point that Councillor Bennett makes, it's a valid point, but I think as has been said, it's hard to see how that really could be incorporated into a planning condition. I'm not sure that quite works, unfortunately. Okay, so the recommendation in front of us is to grant, obviously with the conditions set out in the report. If I can ask everyone in turn whether they agree with the recommendation or not. Councillor Bakhtiar.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett?
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Spalding?
In favour, Chairman.
I'm in favour as well, so that's granted. Okay, thank you very much indeed, everyone, for that. Okay, so now we move on to consideration of Lexum House in Lexum Gardens. So, as I mentioned earlier, I will withdraw from this and take no part. So, Councillor Schmetterling, you come back into the meeting. Dorrie, you're around?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I think and Councillor Bennett will take the chair for this item. So Councillor Bennett, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Sarah Gentry, are you presenting this case?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Thanks, Sarah. Over to you.
So this application is for a roof extension on a 1950s block of flats, which is located on the southern side of Lexum Gardens. And the site is outlined in red on the map. You will note that there is a car park and garages to the rear of the site, to the rear of the building, which can be seen in the aerial photograph from the rear to the right of the screen. And the photograph at the bottom of the screen of the slide shows the front of the building, and you will note that the building is set down slightly lower than its neighbouring properties. This photograph shows the building in context. It also shows that the building is set back slightly from the neighbouring properties. You'll note that there is a main entrance to the flats in the centre of the building from the street, just to the left of the green centre here. Some more photographs. The top left photo shows the relationship with the neighbouring building to the east, and that's number 43, Lexum Gardens. And the top right photograph shows the car park to the rear and the garages. You can also see in the distance some roof terraces on the neighbouring building to the rear. The photo in the bottom left is taken from the roof looking towards Pennant Mews, and then the bottom right photo is the photo of the flat roof itself where the extension is proposed. So permission is sought for a roof extension containing two bedroom flats. And the extension would extend the full width of the roof. It would be set back from the rear of the roof with two roof terraces provided. The roof plan at the bottom of the slide shows that the roof plan shows that the roof extension would have water tanks on it enclosed within a louvered screen. Now, planning permission was granted for the proposed extension in 2018. This permission was not implemented and so has expired, but nonetheless remains a material planning consideration. We've now got the elevational drawings, the existing front elevation and the proposed at the bottom. The extension would be a simple design with windows located to match those windows below on the main building. And then you can also see and the projecting louvers for the water tanks, which would align with the height of the existing chimneys. And then here we have the existing and proposed rear elevation. You'll note that on the rear elevation, larger glazed openings are proposed, and these provide access onto the 2 roof terraces. In terms of materials, it's proposed that the extension be clad in a light grey matte finish with aluminium windows. And then finally, this slide just notes that there would be a means of escape provided between the 2 flats, and that's marked on the dotted with the dotted red line. And then the second drawing just shows the location where it is proposed to site cycle parking and refuse. And there concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So we have 2 objectors speaking and no applicant. So yeah, the objectors speaking are Fiona Quick and David Masters. You have 3 minutes to share between you, so you can split it up however you like. Who is speaking first, please?
I think I am, Fiona Quick.
Fiona? Okay, fantastic. And yeah, just remember that the 3 minutes is to share between the 2 of you. So just hand over whenever you're ready. Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. Contrary to assertions in the planning application, the proposed development will be highly visible from the street and from further away and from the upper stories of buildings opposite the gardens. In terms of appearance, the design of white and grey cladding board and aluminium wrapping around the elevated water tanks totally contrasts with the plain red brick facade of the building and would do nothing to enhance the appearance and quality of the area. In terms of height, the water tanks will be raised a further half-storey above the 1-storey development. The total height of the development is also higher than the property to the west. There is likely to be increased parking pressure, for although the development is permit-free, there is no parking available at the rear, and it is unrealistic to expect that residents in the new build will have no vehicles. There is no space for an additional refuse bin as indicated on the plans. Any extra refuse bins would occupy privately held leasehold parking spaces or the safe throughway for vehicles. There is also no allowance for an extra recycling bin, which will be necessary. The application says there will be no loss of residential garden land. The required 2 cycle lockers will be placed on the communal back garden, reducing the residential green space that is enjoyed by all the residents. The view from the basement flats will also be negatively affected. The roof space is a designated fire escape route for the whole building, not just the new build. The proposed development significantly complicates escape, requiring multiple doors to be opened, and would particularly affect the children, elderly, and visually impaired residents currently living in the building.
Yeah,
Thank
1
you.
minute, 1 minute left. Oh,
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Good evening. I represent the leaseholder of flat 24, which is one of 4 top floor flats with rights of access to the rooftop where the applicant wishes to build the 2 flats. Flat 24 has exclusive rights of access to the roof space at the eastern end of the building. Generally, planning is not concerned with private rights, but I think it is relevant when a permission cannot legally be implemented because of the private rights to the roof space. And so the permission cannot be implemented without compromising those rights. The applicant itself does not have access over and above those rights enjoyed by the 4 flat owners. And the leasehold would say the permission should not be used to authorise a nuisance.
Okay.
I realise that this application
You could
repeats.
just wrap up one more sentence, Mr. Master. Sorry. In terms of
The committee refers to the consultation, but it doesn't make any reference to the loss of amenity value as an issue. And what the leaseholder of flat 24 would say is that the construction of the flats will mean that the existing amenity space currently available to the top floor flats will be removed, and flat 24 will not have access. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. We don't have anyone speaking on behalf of the applicant. So, colleagues, do you have questions for either Fiona Quick or David Masters?
Chair, this is Dory. I could ask.
Yeah.
I could ask. Well,
go ahead, Dory.
Yes, I think. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This, I guess, is Mr. Masters. Are you? Can I just ask? Are you a lawyer?
I am indeed. Yes. Yes. Okay.
I was just interested in your point about flat 24 having access. As you quite rightly say, these matters are not subject to planning law or discussions. But in your view, it doesn't, from what I infer from what you said, it doesn't matter what we decide, even if we grant it, it can't be implemented anyway. So we can only work on planning matters. Do you agree with that conclusion? What do you mean by nuisance? What do you mean by potential nuisance?
Well, I think that the point is that the rights that the owner of flat 24 and the other three, at least two of the other top floor flat owners, have exclusive rights of access to their part of the roof, and so the development could not be implemented without compromising those rights. It is correct that the leaseholder of the airspace takes subject to those rights of access, but the permission itself could not be implemented without compromising those rights.
Right. So if they resisted, I mean, this is now a legal argument. If the current residents resisted compromise, those rights, it can't be done. Is that correct?
It is correct. It would then place the onus on those flat owners to stand up for their rights. Now, I recognise that a permission was granted in the past, and if the council is minded, nevertheless, to allow the permission to be granted, as indeed is the recommendation, then there should at least be an informative as to the rights which the leaseholder of flat 24 holds, along with the other top floor flat owners.
Thank you very much. Could I ask a question now of Ms. Quick, I suppose, because that's a non-legal matter. Your comment, I mean, I think I found your objection, a name on it, but it looks like yours because it got pictures and refers to the parking space. This is, well, first of all, the comment about likelihood of a resident having a car or not. That's obviously not a planning consideration. That's up to whoever moves in. If they have a car and choose to park it nearby in an off-street car park, they do exist. That's up to them. But more greater, that was a funny gong. There was a greater interest, is you're saying that the extra bin locations and recycle bin, that's 2 bins, would be taking up existing parking space. So there is parking space on site at the moment. Is that what you're saying? Ms. Quick.
You might be on mute if you're trying to reply.
Yes, I can't see everybody, so...
Okay, sorry. Okay, I beg your pardon. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon. Right, at the rear, all the garages and the parking spaces are leased on long private leasehold. There is no parking of any sort at the rear. in terms of trying to fit in extra recycling bins, you would need at least one for general refuse and at least another one for recycling, particularly if the aim is to increase recycling rates in the future. There is no space for them. If you look in my planning objection that I sent in to the council, there is a picture from the roof of the existing bins. And you tell me, please, where you would put in another 2 bins that is not encroaching on private leasehold land or safe thoroughfare for the vehicles that enter and exit that rear parking area.
Okay, thank you very much. But you were implying, maybe I misunderstood, but you were saying that these extra bins, 2 bins, would encroach on parking area. And now you say there's no actual parking space beyond those garages.
No. If you look at the diagrams or the pictures of the rear of the building, there are 16 garages which abut to the mews at the rear. Then there is an access driveway where cars have to reverse and come in and out. And then against the wall of the building, you can see it there, against the rear wall, it says there misleadingly informal car parking. There's nothing informal about it at all. There are 6 designated car parking spaces there, which are on private leasehold.
Right.
So you can't just come in and put bins and anything else where you like.
Right, thank you. I mean, I guess maybe, I don't know if that's a planning consideration, but thank you for that information, and we'll have to consider it when we discuss it. I think that's it, really, because there's no applicant to ask, so I have no more questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dory. Mo.
Thank you, Chair. Well, again, we need to look around to see what conditions should be attached to this application. David, if I may call you, you mentioned that you would like to see an informative. Would you like to see any conditions that satisfies your client?
The leasehold title held by the applicant, and by that I'm referring to the tenant as opposed to the freeholder, specifically provides that their interest is subject to those rights of access, and that would be sensible to repeat that in the informative. And I suppose a condition that the permission could not be implemented until without recognizing the rights of access.
Okay, thank you. Same question for Fiona, if I may, if you are still there.
Yes, thank you.
What conditions would you like to see?
I think it should be made clear that in order to satisfy requirements for planning, so that is things that these are not internal housekeeping matters, you would need 2 extra if we talked about the recycling bins, you will need 2 extra recycling bins. Where exactly are they going to go? It's not a trivial matter. I mean, would the council be happy if they went on the pavement? I don't think so. And the same way, the leaseholders won't be happy if they encroach on private area at the rear. In the same way, the cycle lockers, there is a requirement to reduce pollution and cars. So there's a requirement to have cycle lockers. But the only place to put the cycle lockers is on green space. So these planning requirements are reducing the amenity and enjoyment and legal rights that the leaseholders have.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. If there's nothing else from anyone else, I'll just ask one quick question to either of you who would like to answer. If we were to grant, I know one issue you raised is the appearance and the materials used in the, well, particularly cover in the louvres, but perhaps in the windows as well. Is there a condition around that you would like to see? Because I struggle, I can see your point, but I'm trying to think what condition might be put on to improve the appearance and make it more in keeping with the area. Do you have anything in mind?
Do you want me to reply?
Yes, please do.
All right. The additional story that is proposed is totally out of keeping with the building itself. The application suggests that it'll be in keeping with surrounding buildings, but that's not the point. Lexum House is the only designated flat build in the Lexum Gardens Conservation Area, and it is one of the few buildings that has not been altered to date. By putting that on the top, it is totally alien to the style and design of the building.
Mm. So I suppose materials consistent with the rest of the building would be, yeah.
The suggestion, I beg your pardon, I was talking over you.
No, go ahead.
The suggestion that it is set back is, if you look at another photograph I submitted, it is going to be in line with the current red raised brick housing around the water tanks. And that is, if you look at that photograph, it's at the most a foot set back from the front terrace of the building. Mm-hmm. So it is not really set very far back. So it will be very visible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If no other colleagues have questions, we'll move on to questions to officers. Who has any questions for officers?
Yeah, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Dory.
Yeah, thank you. It really relates to the issues we were talking about these legal matters. I appreciate that it's not planning, but can we actually put into the informatives the matter of the rights of access? 424, and indeed the problem of placing extra bins and the cycle stands. Is it something that we can actually do?
Sarah?
Yes, yes, you could put an informative on to the Planning Permission. An informative is simply advising the applicant of something. It is
we
not.
Can't put a condition in, obviously. So, but an informative we can do. Okay.
Yes, so an informative could be put in, just along the lines of you're advised that there are private rights of access to the roof space, which need to be addressed. Something along those lines.
Yeah. And also the bins.
And the bins, they have indicated where those bins would be located. It is a planning issue, and we would expect new units to provide adequate refuge storage. If members are not convinced by what has been shown on the submitted drawings, then we could require that to be submitted, further details to be submitted by means of a condition.
Perhaps we could, because the applicant is obviously not bothering to attend, if I'll put it like that. I mean, we don't know the reasons why the applicant cannot attend, but by not attending, it makes it more difficult. So perhaps asking the applicant to submit details of positioning these and the cycle stands, that's a very good suggestion, I must say. So yes, I agree with that.
I would agree with that, Dory. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask them to submit the details.
I've got a final one. Thank you. I've got a final one here, which arises from the matter of the fire escape. Again, this is not necessarily a planning matter, but somehow we can incorporate the fact that there is, we understand that the roof is a fire escape pathway for the building residents, not just for the new proposed top floor. And I don't know how we can deal with that to make sure that that is satisfactorily dealt with.
Again, I would suggest that you could add an informative to advise the applicant again that this is something that needs to be addressed with building control and cover it certainly that way.
Could we put in a condition that they submit details, or is that not possible for this type of thing?
It is difficult. It would be difficult to do so. It is fire safety is primarily comes under obviously building control rather than planning.
Okay, at least an informative, I think we should put in there.
I think that's fine. Mo, do you have any questions?
Thank you. Well, Chairman, I think listening carefully to what I do apologize by calling the objectives by their first names, but I can only see the first names. So what they proposed is we have quite few missing informations on this application, and we can only determine what's in front of us. That's why I am in a view of deferring this application and asking specific questions. The applicant needs to come back answering these questions. Where exactly they are going to put the bins and how, and the concerns David raised. So I think deferring might be good because we don't have enough information in here.
But the bins, I think Dory's suggestion, which I was supportive of, is that we condition requiring them to agree details of bins. In my personal opinion, I'm not sure the positioning of the bins alone would necessarily be enough reason to call it back to committee. I would personally be satisfied with a condition on that. Were there other things you were worried about?
Well, the bins is a major concern. What I heard from
and the cycle stands.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's objects. It's objects to be put somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Was there that? No, that's a fair point. Well made. Was there anything else, Mo? Any questions?
No, that's all. Thank you.
I'll put what. Sarah, I have one question on the materials. Without wanting to completely redesign the whole application, which obviously we can't do, is there some condition we could put on? So I think those aluminium louvers, I can see why residents might be wary of them and say they're not bringing in keeping with the building. Is there any condition we could put on having materials more in keeping with the building?
Yes, I think the difficulty is that if we don't have a specific suggestion of what those should be, then the only way that you could do it would be to attach a condition, again, requiring, notwithstanding, it would be along the lines of notwithstanding the approved drawings, further details of the materials to the water tank shall be submitted and approved by the council.
Okay, Malcolm, I was going to ask what colleagues thought of that. So Malcolm, maybe you could give your thoughts on that, and maybe you have another question, something else as well.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask exactly the same point that you've raised. I'm looking at condition 3, and condition 3 I think probably covers this. That I'm not sure how much leeway officers would have in talking to the applicant about the submitted details. If one granted this evening, how far could the discussion go between officers and applicant about the final nature of the materials Is there some scope and leeway there, as we're suggesting, that condition 3 could push the final finish a bit nearer to the existing building, or indeed to the sort of design of the mansards in the conservation area itself, in adjoining buildings?
Condition 3 is a general condition which is really referring to the finishing of work or areas which are not shown specifically on the approved drawings. So the recommendation is to approve the drawing, which I've got on the screen now, in essence, which does show the specific aluminium windows, the cladding, grey cladding, and then the louvres. If members feel that they are not appropriate, then we can put a condition on, but I think it would be helpful to have some understanding of what alternatives would be considered more acceptable, and also to bear in mind that that condition could only require materials rather than, as you say, redesigning the extension or the form of the extension, such as a mansard would obviously be a completely different type of roof extension. Does that help? Does that answer?
Yes. Does that answer your question, Malcolm?
Yeah, that was fine. Yeah, thank you. It's just clarified everything for me. I'll have some comments later. Yeah.
What material are the current windows on the building? They are aluminium.
They are aluminium, yes. Planning permission was granted for the replacement of the existing critical windows with aluminium.
Is that so? The whole building as exists currently has aluminium windows. Yes. Yeah. So that's why we went with aluminium. Yeah. I think. I mean although just looking at the building on Google Street View, it just seems the Louvre is adding a whole new material in. But I suppose if the existing windows are aluminium, then they're not adding a new material in. So it's difficult. As much as I want to, it's difficult to construct a condition that's sort of precise enough on this. Malcolm, you said you had some additional thoughts on it.
Yeah, thank you. You know, if I was designing this building, I wouldn't have started from here, but we are looking at what's been presented to us. And my thinking is the integrity of the conservation area is shot through anyway by this building. And the officer's report acknowledges that in 3.1. It's sort of an infill due to bomb damage, and it's of its time. So we can't really say, you know, if we're going one step further, that this building already has taken a huge step out of the conservation area from its surroundings. And so I think the changes on the roof here are modest enough that they're not perfect, they're not what we would have wanted to see, but this building, to my mind, is not exactly enhancing the conservation area architecturally. I mean, it's a set piece on its own. I think this roof line does actually pay some respect to the idea of mansard roofs, which are very common in the borough. And mansard roofs don't match the Victorian style very often beneath them. So I think there's a kind of a precedent here for this building to have a mansard. And although I don't like the use of aluminium in this borough, I think with this building, which is more modern, it just about carries itself off.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, no, I think and it is a handsome building in its own right. But as you say, it's very different from the buildings around it in the conservation area. And I think I'm leaning in the same direction as you, Malcolm, that sort of there's no condition really that would be specific enough that I can think of to improve it. So I think we sort of have to take it out as is. Before we move to decisions, do any other colleagues have any further questions?
No.
Right.
Well,
okay.
If I may, Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, May.
As I mentioned earlier, I think there are too many unanswered points in here raised by the objectors. I would like to ask the officers, do you think, because Councillor Spalding mentioned the same thing, could we have them informatives and conditions? Could we accommodate all the unanswered questions? If we grant them, would you have the authority, the power to implement them, to negotiate with the applicant?
Yes, if the conditions are added, then we would they would need to submit acceptable details to officers before the conditions applications could be approved.
Okay.
So should we just before voting, should we just recap very quickly, if you could, Sarah, the conditions and informatives that we've mentioned?
So you're suggesting two informatives, one along the lines of you're advised that there are private rights of access to the roof space and these need to be addressed. And the second one referring to the fire escape, again, along the lines of you are advised to provide a satisfactory fire escape prior to the implementation of this permission. And then a condition which would require detailed drawings of proposed recycling and refuse bins, and bicycle parking shall be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority and so maintained along those lines, as I say.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Do any colleagues disagree with any of those, or can we proceed to a decision?
I'm happy with that, Chairman.
Yep, happy.
Thanks, Derek. In which case, we'll proceed to a vote. So, Mo, how do you vote?
I will vote in favour with the conditions mentioned earlier.
Thank you. Dory?
Same. In favour with all the informatives, etc., conditions we discussed.
Thank you. Malcolm?
Again, it is difficult, and we are here to balance things up as best we can. Presented with this particular application, which is not the best design it could have been, on balance, I think we should grant it.
Yeah, thank you, Malcolm. And yes, I think especially when we take into account the precedent of the previous planning for the same with the same plans granted just a few years ago, I think I would come to the same conclusion that and vote in favour. So that's four in favour with those conditions and 0 against. At which point I will hand back to Councillor Husband.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Tom. Thank you. Okay, so we can now move on to the application at Wharfdale Street. And I think Katie Harrell, Katie, you're going to introduce this, yeah?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. So the application site is a single-storey double garage located on the southern side of Wharfdale Street, and the garage is attached to a 3-storey building which incorporates the entrance to Coleherne Mews behind. You'll note there is a comparable garage mirroring the application site on the other end of this building. This slide just provides some photographs of the double garage, with the bottom image showing you the wider context, including the Mees entrance, and the flats at 129. Sorry, I think that's my dog. Sorry, everyone. Hopefully under control now. Sorry about that. So the bottom image shows you the wider context, including the Mees entrance, and the flats at 129 Finborough Road behind. The photo also shows the width of Wardale Street and the parking bays on each side of the road. The planning application before you tonight seeks permission to demolish the garages and construct a replacement building comprising a self-contained apartment that would maintain the appearance of a double garage. So you've got the existing north elevation in the context of the street in the top image and the proposed building shown below. Note that the height and massing matches that of the existing garage building, finishing below the stucco of the neighbouring building. This slide includes more detail of the treatment to the four elevations, with the front facade incorporating sort of two garage doors or sort of mirroring what garage doors would look like. And at the rear, you can see there is a recess section which incorporates a light well with a glazed privacy screen. And just briefly in plan, you can see the light well at the rear, and this provides natural light and ventilation to the living accommodation in the basement below. And lastly there for you is the section, just again showing you the double height nature of the development and the comparable height with the existing garage. The very last slide is just to inform you briefly of a couple of refused applications. This one was refused and dismissed at appeal in 2018, and you'll note here the main difference being that this proposed a first story as well in the form of a mansard roof type extension. It also didn't incorporate a light well, so there was no sort of light or ventilation down into the basement. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, in that case, if I can ask, I think Mr. Petrie. Ken Petrie, are you with us?
I am. Hopefully you can hear me. Yes.
Yes, I can. And thank you for waiting. I know it's becoming quite a long evening, but please, when you're ready, if you can go ahead, and you've got up to 3 minutes to state your case.
Thank you, and thank you for all your patience as well. It's you've done a lot more work than me tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose just to start from a planning perspective, it was briefly mentioned there, but this is now the 5th attempt at planning permission for this particular property. I think for myself and the surrounding properties, there's a sort of 3 main concerns. The first being potential subsidence issues. I think sort of damage to property or that sort of thing. The properties at 2 and 2A Coleherne Mews would be affected by this application. Properties at 3 and 3A Wharfsdale Street, as well as where I'm situated in the block of flats at 169 Finborough Road, where there are 12 properties. I think the excavation sort of squeaks this application over the line rather than being a first story, but it also raises those subsidence issues for the benefit of potentially maximum 2 people having a new dwelling. You could affect up to, if you assume 2 people per other property affected, it could be up to 32 people, between 16 and 32 people affected by this planning application for the benefit of 2. I think the construction site, if you look at the plan, is at the maximum extent of the property boundary. And I think there's concerns about the construction methods of where skips go, where tool storage goes, where materials go. You can see that outlined red boundary, which is exactly where they need to put the foundations of the building. And in fact, you can also see those green shrubs around the light well are actually within 169 Finborough Road's property boundary. So they've already taken the liberty of putting some of their plants in our property, if you like, and that can be seen on those drawings. And that's a communal back garden where obviously children play and people exercise, etc. I think the final element is noise. Obviously, it's expected there's some noise during construction, which has been mitigated slightly by hand tools only, I believe. But in a previous application, one of the reasons for rejection was lack of ventilation. That seems to have been solved by, quote, openable windows and roof lights, which is in the approved application this time. So by the council's sort of own terms and conditions of approving this to allow openable windows and roof lights, it's actually that ventilation requirement directly contributes to the current residents' noise concerns by forcing the roof lights and windows to be openable. So I appreciate that the new property might not generate, the new property is in a densely populated area, but anybody that sort of knows sound theory knows that this volume increases if you half the distance. So the new property is going to be significantly closer to our quiet back bedrooms on the east side of the property, away from the busy west side on Finborough Road, and with some key workers and shift workers in 169 Finborough Road alone. I think, you know, there's a new source of noise as opposed to ambient noise around.
I think we understand. No, that's a fair point. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's yeah. So I know I've run over slightly, but it's kind of subsidence damage to property, living conditions, and then as a result of those resale values as a first-time buyer who scrimped and scraped to get on the market. In the first.
No, that's no. I think we all understand. Thank you for that. Now, I think Mary Power, I think you're an agent. You're representing the applicant. Is that right?
That's correct. Thank you, Chairman.
So you've got the same time, which is, well, just a little bit over 3 minutes. So please, when you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you, members, for the opportunity to respond to the objectors' concerns with the proposed redevelopment of the existing garages at Wharfdale Street, replacing it with a modest one-bedroom car-free dwelling. The applicant has welcomed the engagement with officers to achieve a scheme which the council supports, or the officer supports, should I say, in terms of the living conditions for the new dwelling, and that the design can be considered to preserve the character of the Bolton's conservation area. Objectors have raised concerns mainly relating to the temporary disruption caused during the construction phase of the development. Development by its nature does unfortunately cause some temporary disruption. The council officers have applied some extensive rigour to ensure that best practice is applied to the construction phase. And with the conditions proposed, these will ensure appropriate working hours, neighbour consultation during the construction phase, and a methodology to seek to limit temporary disturbance. It is also likely that due to the size of the site, that the basement excavations will be hand dug, which will limit noise disruption further. The construction method statement secures careful consideration of the construction works. A further updated document will need to be approved by the council and then implemented in accordance with the methodology set out. The application proposal will not result in any material long-term disturbance, either through noise, ground stability or pollution once the dwelling is constructed. A single one-bedroom dwelling for occupation by 2 people is highly unlikely to cause any material change to noise or other amenity impacts arising from its use. The loss of the parking will be a benefit in this regard, both in terms of the potential noise and reducing car use on adjoining roads. The sunlight daylight assessment demonstrates that there will be no material effects on neighbouring amenity arising from the proposed development, and the daylight values for the new dwelling meet BRE guidance. The proposal does require the removal of the poor quality hornbeam tree, which is growing at an awkward angle. It will be replaced following construction to provide a good quality tree contributing to local biodiversity. There is no evidence that the temporary works or permanent residential unit will result in unacceptable amenity impacts for neighbouring residents. Suggestions of replacement glazing on neighbouring properties could amount to financial contributions that could be conceived as leveraging the planning permission, as they are not reasonable and related to the development proposed. The conditions appropriately address any temporary impacts arising from the development and secure appropriate permanent conditions for the protection of adjacent residential occupiers. The applicant therefore respectfully requests that members support the officer's recommendation that has arisen from positive engagement with the council to secure an acceptable form of development for the site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions to either party here?
Chair.
Dory, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Just first of all to the applicant, well, basically the applicant Two questions. Did I understand correctly? You would actually replace the tree that would have to go. Apparently, it's in poor condition anyway.
It is, and yes, that is agreed.
Okay.
We obviously need to discuss that with the adjoining landowner.
Okay, because condition 14 just asks for the details of what you plan to do. Okay, so that's good. The second thing, I mean, I just want to address this point of an objection written on behalf of all the residents of 169 Finborough Road, in which they say the latest update in proposal from the architect and or developer still do not even remotely appease any of the previous objections. And then a tiny methodology tweak, is considered to be inadequate. Why do you think that is? This reaction.
Well, obviously, I would disagree with that. The planning officer has made the applicant address numerous concerns about the construction method statement. There was further requests for borehole samples to demonstrate that the basement excavation could be dealt with, that there was no underlying contamination, that the ventilation to the building could be satisfactory for the new residents to live in a good quality home. So we feel that we have been tested, and that's why I sort of mentioned the rigour that officers have put the applicant through to demonstrate these points arising. So we feel these have been addressed as a result of the officer listening to representations that came in.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to ask Mr. Petrie, sort of the other side of that. I can't remember. Are you actually resident of 169 Finborough Road, Mr. Petrie?
Yes, I'm one of the residents of 169.
Okay. So having heard what the applicant has said, do you feel that there's more than a tiny methodology tweak to this application? And if not, what else would you want them to do?
I think the tiny tweak was referring to the excavation method. I think the only discernible difference between applications was that it will be hand dug rather than using pneumatic or kind of.
That's not tiny though. That's substantial.
Well, it wasn't. It still wasn't addressing. So, okay, perhaps the phrasing was clumsy on it, but I'm not a professional planning writer. I'm just trying to represent a block of 12 flats with some people that don't even have computers. So, I'm just trying to do the best I can, I suppose, ultimately. I think what didn't seem to be addressed or was kind of glossed over was, again, still, like the ventilation issue, for example, the forcing the windows, forcing the skylights to act as part of the ventilation, as well as the basement level kind of French doors, sliding doors, does create a new source of sound. I appreciate that people try not to aggressively make noise, but I hear my next door neighbors, and if you assume that somebody might cook with a skylight open directly above their kitchen, directly above their hob and their sink and potentially their washing machine or dishwasher, it's the east side of Finborough Road bedrooms are the safe haven of sleep away from the west side of the A3220 Finborough Road. So I think creating a new source of noise on that side when there's 4 flats that will potentially now be, I think, approximately 5 meters away from the closest source of occupied inhabitants, rather than 15 meters away from the closest source of occupied inhabitants, that's a significant amount. And as I mentioned, the sort of sound pressure level theory, that would be more than double the noise from a new source, far less the original source that's 15 meters away. I think there's also an element of, I've never received a letter. I believe that you have to mail shot the residents around you, and I flagged this in an early stage, but I've never had a kind of neighbours notification thing or whatever we're supposed to get, which seems to have been dismissed too. And as a block, we discussed that, in the current proposed schedule of planning within the council, our block's windows are supposed to be replaced in 2022, and it was suggested that, you know, perhaps there was an agreement to be done where there was a cost to be split or something that, you know, modernized our slightly dated glazing to help allow the planning to go forward, but with some sort of kind of acceptance that new noise was going to be generated. I don't think we were expecting the full cost to be borne by the applicant, but I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that a new building with 2 new people living in it will generate new noise.
Yes, thanks very much. Yeah, I think I don't know what you meant about the neighbourhood, the notifications, but no developer is obliged to is to consult, although it's of course very good practice, and I'm aware even by my own neighbours somewhere nearby the street have invited neighbours to speak about things. Well, I'm just going to ask perhaps briefly if the applicant would like to comment on some of those things, answer some of those things, but just, you know, in summary, obviously.
Yes, in brief. I mean, obviously, providing sufficient ventilation into the building is a good design ethos. It will be only a unit occupied by probably 2 people, so not like a family unit where there might be children or pets, etc. So I think the noise emitted from this compared to an existing garage which has been used for storage, comings and goings on a regular basis probably won't be much different. In fact, probably quieter. With the reduction in parking available on the street. Now, as to paying for windows, obviously there will be disruption during construction. There always is. It's just almost impossible to avoid it. The conditions of the consent will control that to protect residential amenity, but that the applicant pays for replacement windows when there's no sort of measurable impact from the scheme is sort of leaning towards more akin to buying your planning permission, I would suggest, because there's no evidence to suggest that that's going to be a major impact on those residents from a residential unit housing 2 people.
But to be fair, they did say a contribution. I mean, you could look at it as kind of a local Section 106 agreement. But anyway, I just want you to comment on it. They weren't saying you should pay for all the windows. Suggesting.
Yeah, I think actually. No, sorry, I think that's a point that I don't feel we really.
No, I'm just saying
we should.
The point to be made, and that's it. Thank you very much.
No, I think okay, all right. No, I appreciate it. So something of interest to obviously to neighbours and
beyond our remit. Yeah.
But no, I don't think we should go down that avenue. Councillor Spalding, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is a question to the applicant. I wonder if the officers could put up a slide showing the front elevation. With the building next door as well. I think this appeared fairly early on. That's the one, thank you. Proposed north elevation. Can I ask the applicant just this question? Where the red arrow is pointing, presumably somewhere there is a normal doorway.
Yes.
What I find bizarre about this was, okay, it's a matter of symmetry with the other garages. I doubt these garages were original features because this is a beautiful archway with that sort of rustic stonework, and above the detailing as an entrance into a mews. And I just wondered why you chose the facade you did as a couple of garages, because they're not original features. And you had a marvellous opportunity here to design a kind of lodge. If you look in Trebovia Road, which is not far away, there's a terrace with a lovely little lodge building on the end. And it just seems to me, I just wonder, it's a missed opportunity, why you chose to sort of try and make 2 false garage doors. It just seems to be bizarre to me that you wouldn't have made a bit more of it.
I can respond quite clearly on that one. I mean, the applicant has tried various applications and various designs, all of which have been rejected. Now, each one will have its various reasons, and I won't take up time going over those. But a sort of a replica of the sort of Victorian sort of aesthetic wasn't accepted by officers and has been rejected at appeal as well. Now, obviously, some of those are related to scale, where the building was increased by another height. But I want to call it a garage aesthetic because it's not an easy way to describe it any other way. But the doors will have lights in them. The top row of openings that you can see on the front there do have windows in them, and they're not a solid sort of facade. And the doors are sort of sitting in between what would be garage panels for the development. But it has taken the applicant probably 3 or 4 years, if not longer, to reach a proposal which officers could support, because it was about the development not competing with the conservation area and not detracting from those very, as you say, very well designed buildings beside it, the big tall townhouses. And it was thought that something simpler, which just almost slipped into the street scene, would be more appropriate than trying to either replicate something which matched those buildings or did something very modern, because there's only a very small site in which you can do anything, and it was very limiting in what could be done. So I think that it was the sort of the compromise solution, really, I suppose, from a design perspective, to make sure it didn't compete with the conservation area, but actually just preserved it and did nothing of harm to the conservation area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for all those comments and questions. So if we can now move on to questions to officers and making a decision. I'd actually like to go first. Can I just ask, I mean, it seems to me that this site has had various applications in the past. And if I just got this right, understanding the report, what's happened is it's been scaled back. So this application is really the most modest version yet of the application. Is that fair? Can I just check that with Katie? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely correct, Chairman. As we've heard, and the planning history details, this has taken a number of years to get to this point. The slide on the screen now shows you one of the previous refusals, which incorporated an additional floor with that sort of mansard roof design. But yes, there's been various iterations, including a proposal which included the other garages on the other side. So this scheme is very much pared back and I guess less ambitious in terms of what it aspires to be on the site, but that's very much come from feedback from officers who felt that it needed to remain small scale and subordinate.
Yes. No, I think I mean, truthfully, I think officers, this is a personal opinion, I think officers have actually been really quite tough about that, actually, in insisting that it has to remain at that kind of scale. Colleagues, any questions, or can we move on to discussing the making a decision? Councillor Spalding, Markham.
Yeah, if I could just ask Ms. Hurrell, I find this quite bizarre that an officer would sort of recommend we have this faux garagista sort of neo-garagist style. It's just bizarre. I know some Muse properties do have their original garage fronts, which were infilled, well, not original, they were infill of stables. And then the car came along and they had garage fronts, and then people took them over and lived in them. But I think that building, the entrance to Coleherne Mews, is something very special to me. I've known this building for over 40 years, nearly 50 years. And I think that building deserves something better. Of course, we can't design something better. We have to look at what's in front of us. But I'm quite surprised that officers didn't sort of, sort of advise on something that would have been more matching to the conservation of that building.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's always going to be a little bit subjective. I do understand what you're saying, that the design that has come forward and that is from input with officers is, as I said, I think I used the words earlier, not that ambitious. I suppose it's trying to replicate what's there, as that was felt that it allowed the impressive building at the entrance to Culham Mews to shine. One of the proposals that was put forward included the use of sort of carrying stucco across the front elevation of the new dwelling to see how that would work. But actually it was felt that that was inappropriate and sort of drew attention to the new property, when really the focus of the street should remain that impressive building at the entrance to the Mews. But yes, I do hear what you're saying. I think it could have gone, there are many ways maybe this could have been approached, but this was felt to be the most subtle and the best way of retaining a subordinate appearance to that building.
Okay. I'm amazed you say it was the most subtle. But all I can say is just, well, I'll reserve my comments for when the chairman asks for them. But okay. I think this is a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, anyone else? No. Okay. I think we need to make a decision. I think I'd like to go first. Actually, I think this is an unusual application. On the one hand, actually, I do have a lot of time for the points that Mr. Petrie made. I think the difficulty with much of what he said is that the planning system as a whole is a kind of higher level system. So, for example, the idea that a new property is created where you could have windows open, skylights open, and people are using, washing machine, dishwashers, and making some noise. I completely understand that's something that if you lived immediately by and maybe above, that's not something that would be particularly desirable. But the planning system doesn't really operate in a way that says that is unacceptable. I think at the other end of the scale, personally, I actually have quite a lot of sympathy with the points that Councillor Spalding has just made, in the sense that it seems as though the officers have sort of pushed the applicant, who obviously wants to get a planning permission, into something that maybe is arguably overly modest, and in fact something slightly more substantial would in fact be acceptable. However, and this is the however, we come back to a fundamental principle I think we're all familiar with, that it's our business to consider the application that is in front of us. And I would suggest, colleagues, that personally I think what is in front of us, it might not be what we would like or we would ever do ourselves were we in the position to decide, but it needs to be considered acceptable, and I think that's very strongly where I would come down. Colleagues, would anybody else like to express a contrary view? Malcolm.
I accept everything you've said, Chairman, but the contrary view is, I think, if we were minded to grant this, at least the applicant would have something to go ahead on with his property or her property, which has failed 3 times already.
Yes.
And I'm bearing that in mind. I mean, and presumably, if it ever came back to committee where he wanted to do something that would enhance and preserve the conservation area, by doing what architects often call pastiche, but I see nothing wrong with that, to enhance the facade of his property if he gets fed up with living behind a garage door, or he wanted to do something a bit more substantial. If I were on that committee looking at this site, I would be very favourable to that, because this site, I think, demands something a bit more aesthetically enhancing of the conservation of that building which it's attached to. And so given what we've got, that's what we're looking at. I'm always bearing in mind in the future that we might see something better, but this is what we've got to look at tonight, and I agree with you on that.
No, Malcolm, I think I agree with you. I think that's fair, absolutely fair comment, and obviously that, you know, a lot of people are going to have heard you say that. So I agree with that. Mo, do you just quickly, do you want to go ahead?
Chairman, well, I didn't ask any questions because I was listening to both sides' arguments and questions raised by other colleagues, and I read the papers. When we reject an application time after time, that doesn't mean we are determined to reject this application or a specific application indefinitely. So there are good improvements, and the officer's assessment, it's a good application. It's sometimes I don't give myself the right to say I don't like the color, I don't like the specific design, that's why I have to be against this application, because people want different things. If the applicant wants to have this as a front of their property, this is their choice. I don't see any harm for the neighborhood. So I think overall, I think it's a good, could be, I'm happy to approve it.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, thank you very much indeed, colleagues, for those comments. Well, in that case, the recommendation is to grant permission as set out in the report with the various conditions. So if I can ask in turn if people are in favour or against. Councillor Bakhtiar.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
In favour, Chairman.
Councillor Schmedling.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Spalding.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. And I'm in favour as well. Okay, so planning permission is granted for that. Thank you very much indeed. Excuse me. If we can now move on to 9 Markham Street, please. And I think, Alison, I think you're going to introduce that, yeah?
Yep, that's correct. Okay,
Great.
So thank you. The application site comprises the 2-storey mid-terrace building with lower ground floor level located on the eastern side of Markham Street, in use as a single residential dwelling. On the images provided here, the application site is a building which is a light blue painted ground floor with no existing mansard. This slide shows the existing lower ground and first floor plans of the building. The application seeks planning permission for the construction of a single-storey lower ground floor extension, a first floor closet wing extension and a mansard roof, together with alterations to and replacement of openings to the front and rear elevations and the lowering of the ground level to the rear. The works are highlighted red on the plans you see in front of you. Revised plans were received during the course of the application to remove proposals for a ground floor terrace with associated balustrade. This no longer forms part of the application proposals. This slide shows the existing and proposed front elevation of the building and highlights the proposed mansard roof extension with 2 dormer windows, together with the lowering of the sills to the first floor windows. To the rear elevation, this slide again shows the existing and proposed elevations, highlighting the lower ground floor extension, closet wing extension and roof extension. Conditions are recommended to ensure that new openings are timber framed, white painted, double hung sliding sashes, and to ensure that the roof lights are flush with the roof rather than raised as shown here. This slide shows how the proposed works would sit within the wider context of extension and alterations to the rear part of this terrace. As you can see from the aerial and the plans, there are various examples of roof extensions and closet wing extensions of various forms and style. Finally, here, the existing and proposed sections of the building are shown. The lower ground floor to the rear would match that to the front of the site. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission for the proposals, subject to the recommended conditions included within the report. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. David Cox, David, are you with us?
I am indeed, yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for waiting. I know it's been quite a long evening, but please, when you're ready, you're a near neighbour, yes? When you're ready, please go ahead, and you've got up to 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I wonder if the next to last, I think it was, slide could be shown, please. Sorry, not that one, the one before that. Yes, that's the one. Thank you. Could I also ask? I see in the addendum report there's a reference to, in fact, to my additional comment received, which is described as attached. I assume that is my email to Miss Wesley of the 28th of April. And really, my point is this: I'm concerned solely with the rear elevation, which faces the rear of the west terrace of Markham Square, where I live, and it's concerning the change in the glazing pattern from the traditional to the more modern. There are currently traditional 6/6 pane sash windows at the ground and first floor of 9 Markham Square. It's not entirely clear from the existing slide on the screen, but in fact, both ground and first floor windows are traditional 6/6. The proposal is to remove these and replace them with 3 2-pane sash windows at the ground, first floor, and the new second floor levels. And I would simply ask that the proposed condition relating to the windows, number 4, should also ensure that these are the traditional 6/6 panes, which would match the neighbouring properties which I and my neighbours look out upon. And where there have been extensions to neighbouring properties, they've all followed that pattern rather than these rather more modern 2-pane windows. And I would suggest that the proposal will not reinforce the character and integrity of the original building or preserve the character of the neighbourhood. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, the applicant has not registered. So, colleagues, any questions to Mr. Cox? Actually, it's perhaps maybe I can go first. So, if we look at the image in the centre of our screen here, the proposed, obviously we've got what look like fairly substantial sort of sash windows, which are obviously, a sash upon a sash, in terms of the panes. And you're saying that you'd prefer it's really an older kind of Georgian style where there are a number of small panes. Is that correct? If I can just understand that.
Yeah. Yes, that's absolutely correct, and that is in fact what I think all the neighbouring properties have.
Okay, all right. Well, no, thank you for making that clear, colleagues. Any other questions to Mr. Cox? Because I think we might pursue this with officers. Anybody?
Chair.
Dory, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Cox. I mean, you did say that your concern is just the rear. I noticed all these other people were objecting to noise from the terrace, but that's gone now. So I guess that really is about the only thing that's worth discussing, because I think all the other things are depressed. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Well, in that case, Mr. Cox, thank you very much indeed for making that important point. So, if we can now move on. As you're familiar with, probably having sat through a long evening already, we now move on to Councillor conversation with officers. And if perhaps I can pursue this point immediately with Alison Long, presumably it would be, we could condition that the form of these windows was, I mean, what's proposed is fairly traditional, but we could propose a more traditional form, couldn't we?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, obviously there's the condition 4 that's currently worded as such of the windows, but we could amend that wording slightly to require it to be 6/6, 4/4, and whatever you members consider appropriate. And then we would also just need to revise condition 2 as well, just to say notwithstanding the details shown on the approved plans.
Yes, I mean, I would suggest, colleagues, I would suggest that what we should do is that we should say that officers, condition 4, that officers should go back to the applicant and have a discussion about a more traditional form of window. I mean, Mr. Cox has said 6 and 6. Maybe there's a reason why 4 and 4, but I can understand. I understand the point, because we're talking about a part of Chelsea where, you know, these are old buildings, and I can see that a slightly different form of window might well be something that actually was something that was appropriate to be put in by condition. I don't know, what do other people think? What do you feel?
Yeah, I think you've suggested something very reasonable, and I would like to second it.
Okay. Tori, Malcolm, what do you think about this? Tom?
Yes, Chairman, you have my support.
Yeah, likewise, I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, we can find out what the reason is for having it like this, or if it can be adjusted to fit maybe to match the other buildings. Sounds okay, yeah. Yeah,
no, okay. I mean, I think that's a sensible. I think that's sensible. So what we're saying is, just to make certain, for like Mr. Ross representing the legal department. So what we were we minded to grant, we'd be saying that condition 4 would be amended so that officers would have a discussion with the applicant on a more a style of window which might be 6/6 or 4/4 that was in keeping with the similar windows on neighbouring properties, and that would be the expectation when we came to approving the conditions for approving condition 4. Does that, Ross, does that make sense to you? Is that reasonable?
Hi, Chairman. Yes, that would be reasonable. The only question I would ask is whether planning officers think that differs too far from the actual application itself, and whether they think that those discussions really need to be had in light of a separate application. But they could, if planning officers feel that they could have those discussions, then that would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the application, personally, I would feel the application that there's enough going on here that the exact form of windows can sensibly be a matter for condition. But Alison, would you like to comment on that?
Sorry, just to clarify for my benefit, are you suggesting that officers speak with the applicants to receive an amended plan prior to determination, or are you suggesting that officers speak with the applicant to see what may be possible and then condition it that it should be 4/4 or 6/6, whichever is appropriate?
Well, no, sorry, it's slightly different. What I'm saying is that I think we should amend condition 4 so that officers need to have a discussion with the applicant as to the exact form of the windows. And given the committee discussion, it's clear that 6/6 or 4/4 it would be our preference. We're not changing the size of the windows or anything like that. It's just the form, the exact detailing of it, the kind of thing which is specified by condition.
Right,
Does
understood.
that make sense?
Yeah, understood.
Is that reasonable? Yeah.
Chairman, could I just chip in here? Sorry, it's Lisa Chung. Just very quickly
Lisa,
on this.
fine.
I'm wondering whether it's worth amending the condition for asking for details to be submitted, for us to agree. So a submission of details condition, as opposed to going away and having a conversation with the applicant. I guess the reason I say that is because we could have those conversations, but should the applicant not want to change the windows, I'm not quite sure where that leaves us in relation to issuing the permission.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from on that, and I'd go along with that. I think maybe you're right. That's the best mechanism for us to do this.
Does that sound okay? I mean, I think it's really clear. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I think it's clear what the committee would prefer to see, and we can minute it, and we can also add an informative to supplement that condition to say, the applicant is advised to consider 4/4 or 6/6, a more traditional approach, something like that, to make it clear what we expect to see as part of that condition. Yeah.
Okay. I think Lisa Chung is. I think that's. I absolutely agree with that. I think that's probably, thinking about it, I'm sure that's the best. That's the best way of giving effect to what colleagues and Mr. Cox has suggested when he spoke to us. Okay, so if we amend condition 4 in that way, if I can ask everyone, the recommendation is to grant, with obviously, as discussed, a change to condition 4 there about the windows. If I can go down the list and ask people in favour of that or against. Councillor Bakhtiar.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Schmedling.
Yes, I'd just like to note that if there is a reason why this can't be changed, at least that should be considered. Otherwise, I'm in favour, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spalding?
Yes, in favour, Chairman.
Thank you. And I'm in favour as well. So that's granted with that adjustment to condition 4. Thank you very much.
Could I just make one brief comment at the end here?
Yeah.
Looking at the architect's drawings, could the officers please ask AAJ Architects to check in future their spelling of the street that they're working in? They refer to M-A-R-K-A-M, Markham, all the way through on all their drawings. And it doesn't exactly inspire confidence in one's architects if they can't spell the name of the street that they're working in.
All right.
Also, I would say this committee, Chairman, of this borough is not used to having applications like this. We're used to having proper spellings. Thank you.
Yes, I think, I hear what you say, but I think it's not really for us, I'm afraid. Okay, so let's move on. And Katie, I think it's with 16 and 16A, Princess Gate Mews.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Hopefully the dog will remain quiet this time. Apologies again for that earlier. So the application site here comprises a pair of 3-storey plus basement mews properties located on the northeastern end of the Southern Mews. Just a couple of things to point out in this photo of the existing buildings. Note that there is one garage to number 16 at the end of the mews, and then there's a garage to 16A, which is where the white doors on the far left-hand side of the photo are. Also, you'll see that both buildings are currently boarded up. They have been for many years, with works approved under historic permissions having stopped on site. So the basement previously approved has been constructed, but the internal works, including amalgamation of the two properties and elevational changes, have not been completed. So very quickly then, in terms of the proposals under consideration this evening, these mainly relate to replacement windows, and this includes new doors to the old garage at number 16A. These would match the doors next door. At the end elevation to number 16, a new entrance door is introduced on the bottom left there, with the garage here would be retained. And to the east elevation at the rear, 2 new windows are proposed, 1 in the top left and 1 in the bottom right. Oh, and I've lost the presentation, unfortunately. It was just the ground floor plan, which is in your packs if you did want to have a look. I just included it to confirm that under these proposals, the two buildings would remain as separate homes, so it's no longer proposed to amalgamate the properties. And the property at number 16A, which would be losing the garage parking space, would be secured as permit free as per usual procedure. And that's the presentation, Chairman.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Colleagues, questions? Anyone got any questions about this? Yeah?
Not really. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, not really. I mean, it doesn't. The objections don't appear to be substantive to the design of the building. They refer to, not complying with previous consents or not finishing and so on. But the only thing is that in the supplementary report that there was a confusion about who gets the permit, which bit becomes permit free. As long as we do it the right way around, I think that's important.
Yes, that you're absolutely right. I should have pointed that out within the addendum. Unfortunately, the officer's report had 16 and 16A the wrong way round, but we would ensure obviously the legal agreement secures number 16A as being permit free. So that was the one with the white garage doors on the far left-hand side of that photograph I showed you.
Yeah, because of the loss of a garage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I think that's all really.
Okay. All right, thank you very much indeed. So if there are no other questions, I think we can probably move to, excuse me, move to a vote. So the recommendation is to grant, obviously, the subject to legal agreement about parking. So if I ask everyone for their decision.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt this, but I've just noticed, I should have seen this before, but in one of the objections, it speaks about, looks like noise. I'm not sure, 40, that they can hear. I don't think it's a construction noise. It's noise from the use of the stairwell, assumed to be wooden or hard surface. Is that something to do about that? Sorry, I'm sorry to just bring it in just like that. It's the last page of the objections, item 3 from Mr. Matthew Woodhead. Sorry, that's 2 Mr. Woodhead. Gillian and David Gendron. They say the proposed stairwell at 1616A abuts the party wall shared with 45 printers gate. As owners of 45 PGM, we are concerned with the materials to be used. A decade ago, when the prior owner occupied the property, the noise from the use of the stairwell could clearly be heard throughout 45. Consequently, to reduce the noise, we would like to know if any conditions can be put on the construction to reduce the consequent effect on our property. Well, that's actually rather important. Sorry, it just struck me now.
So just to clarify, that the staircases that I think the objector is referring to, you can see on the ground floor plan slide on the screen now. You can see it at the back of the 2 properties where the staircases are located. That is next to the party wall with numbers 44 and 45. However, it is just internal works. The planning application before you isn't seeking to demolish any of the rear walls or rebuild it. So I would say that really anything we would be doing to try and require any changes to that internal layout or any additional installation or anything like that would be beyond the scope of this permission. part of the reason for the noise that they might be experiencing could well be because the building isn't complete, and you saw that, you know, a lot of it is just boarded up at the moment, and it may well be that once it's actually completed and windows put in, so on and so forth, that a lot of that noise is dealt with. Of course, there is other legislation through Party Wall Act and building regulations that would also maybe help with that issue.
Okay, because they were really concerned. They thought it might be a hard surface of some sort. But as you say, we're not discussing changes to that, so therefore nothing can be done at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. Thank
you
very much.
That's it. Yeah, cheers.
Fine. Okay, so if I can ask for a vote on the recommendations, please. Councillor Bakhtiar.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetling.
In favour.
Councillor Spalding.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. And I'm in favour as well, so that's granted. Thank you very much indeed. And finally, if we can now turn to the applications in Hans Crescent, and I think Katie, you're actually going to do these, aren't you?
Yes, thank you very much. Just a couple of slides for you on this one. The photographs on screen at the moment just show you the space that we're referring to. So I'm sure you all know it very well. It's the pedestrian area of Hans Crescent, adjacent to Harrods. The premises at the moment, so the application premises are a number, we're number 32 to 34 and number 42, Hans Crescent, and they both have a pavement licence issued in December for tables and chairs in this central location. And this licence runs up until the 30th of September, and this was part of the government's initiatives to support businesses in the COVID recovery period. And under this licence, they can place tables and chairs from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. This is a slightly different application. It's now for planning permission. The idea being that permission is granted for a year, so that you'll see from condition 1 in the recommendation that they would just have a year permission, which would enable us to consider the impact in a year's time should they wish to reapply. This slide just shows you the proposed layout. So we have 14 tables in each of the zones with 56 chairs. And that's the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
No, but I've got a comment really. I'm surprised that they're going this route because there is an expectation that these pavement licenses will be extended beyond September this year, 2021, to by another year. I think it's going through Parliament now, and I don't suppose it'll fall. So most people are going for pavement licenses. But anyway, I'm just interested to note that they're going the other way. But I agree with the 1 year temporary proposed license.
Yeah, it is a slightly odd scenario, particularly as I think the conditions applied to the planning permission are perhaps more stringent than maybe on the licence. But I think it's, as I say, it's testament to the fact that they want the opportunity to show that they can operate successfully without causing issues, and then sort of reapply in a year's time for a more permanent permission. Beyond that, that perhaps the pavement licence would allow them.
Okay, all right. But wait a minute, how is this different from a tables and chairs license then, as opposed to a pavement license? Traditionally, before pavement licenses, people ask for tables and chairs licenses. So what's this then? This is a planning application, but how is that different from a tables and chairs license?
So the license that they've got is a pavement license, which is part of the
I understand what that is. Yeah. But how's this different?
Because in terms of the proposal before us, there is an extra 2 tables on each of the areas, but beyond that, it's very similar. It's just a duplication in many ways.
Understood. Sorry, what I'm trying to understand is the legal difference, because up to before the pandemic, people who wanted to put tables and chairs out got a tables and chairs license for a year. I mean, for example, there's one on Exhibition Road at the southern end, also sort of mostly pedestrianised. So the tables and chairs license automatically come up for renewal every year. So how's this different, legally speaking? I don't understand why they've gone this route.
Well, often you will need a tables and chairs license in addition to planning permission. So it all comes down to the ownership of the land and whether it's publicly maintained highway or private highway space. So often it's that they work in conjunction with each other.
Thank you. Okay, fine. Thank you.
I think, Chairman, if I could help.
Markham, go ahead.
Yeah, you need a one-off planning permission to use the space for this change of use, and then once you've got your one-off planning, you have to renew your license every so often, once a year or whatever the condition is on the license.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but of course you can decline.
Yeah, I think Malcolm, I think that makes sense to me. I think you're right about that. But before us this evening is simply a planning permission. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay, well, I mean, I agree with it. It's fine. Make it for a year is fine, because that's what we've been doing with other licenses, the tables and chairs and pavement licenses. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Well, in that case, if I can ask everyone whether or not they agree with the recommendation set out in the report to grant planning permission. Councillor Bakhtia.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Schmedling.
In favour, but I would like to say for anyone listening and watching the recording one day, if you've got any problems coming up, please tell the council.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Otherwise,
Councillor Spalding.
In favour, Chairman.
And I'm in favour as well. Okay, so that is granted. Very good. Well, thank you very much indeed, everyone. That concludes our meeting this evening. And a thank you to all of our officers, including those from governance and IT, who help all these meetings function so smoothly. So thank you very much indeed, everyone, and a very good evening.